Yes, can you hear me?
Awesome, I've got you. Good morning. How you doing, dude?
Leon, yes. Good man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little bit I probably should have slept more last night, but had a bit of an unexpected visit. With all things considered, that probably wasn't the right thing to do in terms of like actually seeing people at all. But
Right.
lo and behold, that happened last night, and it ended up being quite a late meeting because I think we're all quite starved of just interaction, at least the face-to-face interaction, or
Oh, right. Yeah, man. Tell me about it. I was the same, dude. I was kind of up. I was feeling a lot of sort of trepidation about this chat, I think, last night. So I was a little bit like buzzy. But like I said, it was more excited, I think, to talk to you. And yeah, I mean, I can be quite an anxious person anyway. So I was just a bit like, "Ooh, am I overthinking it? Should I just relax?" And then I did drift off and I'm feeling all right now, actually. I kind of just calmed down and had a little, Wim Hof sesh, little bit of mindfulness, walking around the garden and calmed down a bit. But it's such a strange thing, man. Talking spontaneously as it's being recorded, like I've never actually done it before, so it's a little bit nerve wracking for me. I must admit.
yeah, I can totally resonate with that because I think getting into like deep conversations with friends of mine who I know are interesting is one thing, and you know I'm more than happy to go into like kind of really abstract or kind of strange territories with my friends, but then recording it is a completely different thing. And I suppose because it's kind of like what are we doing? What are we doing this for? We could just chat on the phone, right? And or we could just
Right.
chat.
Mm.
We could have met at some stage, exempt of a global pandemic, and gone through some ideas about what makes each other work. But I suppose there's
Mm.
something about the sort of current climate and culture of things whereby, and also our maturity as well. And I do see like this really quite cool level of maturity in terms of those ideas that were once sort of developing and formative and have now sort of established in terms of people
Mm.
around me. And I think that there's almost like I don't know, there's a sort of a resource to put out there in terms of those ideas and the establishing of those ideas and those practices and so on and so forth. And I mean
Yeah.
that's long-winded sort of sentence, I guess, about being nervous to interview
No,
or
no, I think
speak.
you're right. I think there's something to say about uh, just sort of general relativity, like time being relative. Like when I've been thinking about what I want to talk about today with you, it's one thing actually remembering, and then it's a totally separate thing actually thinking about it in hindsight. And because you obviously experienced it in a completely relative way to your experience back then, but now, like what you're saying about just general maturity, it is completely different, and it's almost that's the weird thing as well about sort of this like platform that you're doing and a lot of other of these sort of blade chats is like you can only really remember it in hindsight. It is difficult to sort of recall exactly how you felt in the moment, but and I think it's easy to sort of romanticize about it. But that's what I've loved about a lot of these blade casts or whatever they're called,
Mm.
just how people can reconceptualize it in their later life, like I have been doing so much of. And but it's not only that, dude. I think for you it's also nerve wracking because the funny thing with us is that we've never we you all right, I need to start from the beginning. Like I need to set the tone, man, by just
Sure.
by thanking you to ask me to do this. It's a bit of a trip for me and a bit of a milestone. You are someone that I have looked up to from like the very beginning and admittedly revered at some points in my life. Not admittedly, understandably revered at some points in my life. And it's always been that sort of we've always bumped into each other at certain events and skate comps and loads of friends in common, mutual friends, but we never really had a proper chinwag about who we are, what we're about. It's always been a little bit of skate chat and a sort of like, for me, obviously, it's always been the classic sort of Grom. I'm just going to play it cool and just not. I'm just going to say as little as possible because I know what I'm like. So, and I actually, there's been a few occasions where I actually do regret talking to you because I did feel confident to sort of approach you in that aspect, but it was always just like, I think that the interesting thing is that in all of those experiences, we were just so wrapped up in what was happening in the moment. Again, it's that like trying to recall what happened, but it is relative to the time. So we were just so in the moment of skating that we probably didn't have much time to be sort of getting to know each other anyway, to a degree, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
it's a surreal thing. But again, thank you. And I could just talk about you and the impact that you've had on my skate life and now in my just everyday life, getting to see how you have been managing this podcast. And like, you are just an anomaly to me. Like, that it's one thing your ability, your physical abilities and your skating and your, no pun intended, devotion to skating, but the way that you can articulate yourself so eloquently, I just find astonishing. Like, it really is so beautiful, and it actually makes me a bit emotional because it's so different to be able to communicate physiologically than verbally. And I think for me, that was always why I was so interested in all things physical, because I really didn't have the skills to be able to articulate myself verbally. And it's so different, but it's an interesting conversation because you can sort of talk about which is more important. Does it matter? If I can communicate physiologically, does it matter so much that I can't sort of articulate myself verbally? And that was the first quarter of my whole life. And I always sort of maybe used it as an excuse. I was like, I don't need to talk. I don't even need to have much of a sort of personality because I can just get away with sort of communicating physiologically. Do you know what I mean? But again, with you, it's like, it's so inspiring to just see that you can do both and you can do them so well.
Well,
but anyway, I'll stop. You can edit all that out, man. It's fine.
Well, look, I don't think I've been as meaningfully or as heavily complimented maybe for a long time, or it hasn't sort of resonated like that. So I'd actually just sort of say that's actually quite stunning and lovely for you to say so. And I suppose there's a couple of things that I think about, and I mean, yeah, articulation and outpouring what's inside into some kind of meaning and framing that and conceptualizing that. I mean, these are all, I suppose, processes kind of the arts, but then there's a kind of functioning that you need to do as well, whether that's like growing and being a social person and being able to make relationships work, or appreciating the ups and downs of the sort of mundane day-to-day kind of aspects of living that are like kind of underpinned socially, I guess. And then like I suppose physical stuff, physical expression and creating meaning or having ventilation for what goes on inside of me through physical stuff was this similar thing to me, really. Like, it wasn't always the case that I was able to articulate myself verbally very well. I mean, I think there have been a few key factors in my life that really set a fire underneath those faculties, and I think definitely reading is one of them. And I don't think there's a replacement for reading some of the like seminal canonical kind of literatures, like, you know,
Mm.
Gothic, classic Gothic literature, for instance, or you know, reading into like, I don't know, mythology or spirituality, for instance, you know, around these terrains will really help you kind of put a scaffolding of some of the weird, strange, um,
Mm.
you know, like otherworldly stuff that goes on inside the head. And I think like there's no real replacement for reading. But I guess the other thing would be, if you dare to express such strange kind of ideas, that you've got people around you that help to grow that wavelength and connectivity, that actually give you the permission to kind of go further into those areas, I guess. And I have been
Mm.
particularly blessed in that area as well, with the people who I either walked into their lives, or vice versa. And there are a couple of people in particular with that regard, you know. And yeah, and just sort of these eras that we can like look back on and reframe, as you were saying. It's not as if you knew what was unfolding in the moment. It's
Mm.
sort of almost like at this point, this mid-30s, early mid-30s kind of age range, you're almost able to discern, delineate, and take a look at these eras of your life, and not necessarily make up what actually happened. It's kind of like this head of steam that you're able to appreciate in terms of the areas that
Yeah.
you've gone into. Is that like so?
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think for me as well, actually being out of the game for so long, not actually skating, has again brought so much more of a clear narrative to just simply my memories and what might have been happening under the surface. And it's just beautiful to have that time and space away from it, however frustrating it has been not skating. Just because again it's that romanticizing about it, and that, like, I hate to say it, the nostalgia. I know how cliche it is, but it really is.
That
Like,
word
I,
crops up quite often, doesn't it?
man, and it's just like, it's so, I find it so emotional. I think because, like this morning, for example, to sort of get my head in gear, I was sort of listening to these 90s dance anthems, like Robin S, Corona, not that kind of Corona, Hadaway, what is love?
Yeah.
Baby, don't hurt me, like that. It was just this banging playlist, all that stuff. And like, it is really like my pupils were sort of dilated because I haven't heard those tracks so long, because I was thinking about the Inception stories and how I got into skating, and being at the roller disco, listening to those dance tracks, really euphoric,
Wow.
just uplifting,
Sounds
beautiful track. Like, and you listen to them now, it's like, actually, I don't find them that corny, man. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of, say what you will about the novelty aspects of those kind of playlists and those tracks, but God, like, you just listen to the voice and you can just remember just going around that loop, or I can. And honestly, like, I couldn't tell because I was in the shower, but it's like a tear came to my eye. There's so, just the bass lines and the beats and that whole 90s nostalgic thing. Again, I hate to say it, I know how cliche it is, but there is something to the mid to late 90s that was just going on culturally, that was just so sort of explorative. I don't know if that's the word. And just sort of, all it, not in a hippie way, but it was all about love. Like, if you read the titles about the, like, all of those sort of dance 90s things, it's quite funny. If you kind of scroll down, it's like, show me love, what is love, I can be your love, rhythm is a dancer, all this stuff is all about
These are all
love.
bangers. Yeah, these are
And
bangers.
then every single one is just a banger. And it's just, you I don't think we need to worry about that cliche so much. There was something going on really fresh and new, and like in the mid to late 90s, at least, again, it's completely relative to my experience. So,
So there's
but
music. So there are particular music tracks that almost incite like a composite image from that like period of your life.
oh,
Basically, it's
absolutely.
kind of
Yeah.
what you're. Is that
And
right?
that, absolutely. And the beauty of Spotify is you can just like I implore your listeners to just do it now. Just type in 90s dance anthems, and it's the first 5 tracks, and it was those 5 tracks that were just on repeat, and you'll know them, you'll remember them if you're, you know, at our age kind of thing, or not. But, and it really is that sort of, your pupils dilate and you're just transported back in time. But for me, it really is just about rollerblading specifically, which is like the beautiful thing as well. But not, well, not entirely, you know, it was also about what else was going on. But
were you like a 90s, were you a 90s skater?
Yeah, so I got my first pair of skates in 97. I did a bit of reconnaissance with my mum the other day. So I would say, but I wouldn't say I started in 97 because I was just doing so many other things. But I got my first pair of skates, got some Bauer FX 3s, the black and yellow ones.
Black and yellow.
Yeah, beautiful, wicked skates. And my brother, who was the guy who got me into it, or he introduced me to it, he had the Bauer FX. They were the black and blue ones. They were very similar.
Better ones, more expensive ones? Was he
basically
your elder brother?
Yeah, elder brother, Chris, his name is. He was sort of at the time just rocking a lot of puberty and medium. And he, I honestly don't know who introduced him to it. We were trying to, unfortunately, he lives in Bristol. So I wanted to get in touch with him because I could have found out more from him about like the inception of it all. But yeah, no, I honestly think that he was introduced for it just through maybe some people in Bristol and maybe like through the skate films. But our first 2 skate films, well, the first 2 skate films I saw were Fast Shoes and Hoax 4, the Brass Monkeys.
I think it sounds like we had a pretty sort of similar get going, really. I mean, the first skate story is almost exactly the same, and then the first videos are almost exactly the same, and the year is almost, I mean, I think I'm late 96, 97. So
right.
that's so, you know,
that surprises me. I thought, no offense to you, I thought you'd be 94 or 95 or something. I thought you were a bit ahead.
I guess I started a bit late. I guess I started a little bit later than some of my mates. When I hear people of my age that started, you know, there are some people like who started when they're in single digits, like they were 6, 7 or 8 or something. But I discovered skating when I was 13. 12 or 13. I actually don't know at this point. I really actually don't know.
I was 10. I think I was 10.
Sure.
I was in the last year of primary school. But again, it's not when I started. It's just when I got my first pair of rollerblades. I wouldn't say I started then. I was doing all sorts of other things as well. But sorry, let me just to interrupt. One point I have to make is just how unbelievably fascinated I am by how synonymous everyone's inception story is. Of all of these podcasts I've been listening to on Jump Street and what's the other one? Wheel Scene. No matter, it's just these people all over the world. It is almost identical to like my story, which is it actually makes me laugh, because if you saw where I grew up and how rural and how quiet a village it was in Gloucestershire, you know, where Tolkien based. I live in Stroud now, but it was in a little village called Kemble, outside of Cirencester, which has a population, no joke, of like 1,000. There's like 1,000 people that live there. Hamlet. And I would listen to these stories of like, I mean, I think I heard one of maybe like Charles Dunkel on, I can't remember which one it was. It might have been Wheel Scene, I can't remember. But it was just, everything was just like so linear and identical to my story. And it was like, he's on the other side of the world. And it was just, it's just amazing because of that, the connection. But B, I think really what is probably more interesting is the power of marketing.
Yeah,
And do you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like it's always this it's the roller hockey thing, it's the roller disco thing,
yeah.
it's the Bauer thing, and
Mm.
you're in the cul-de-sac and you're
Maybe
playing roller
D2 Mighty
hockey.
Ducks kind of thing, maybe a
Mighty
bit of
Ducks
ice
was one of my
skating kind of
favorite
thing.
films. Yeah, ice skating, all of that sort of like strapping the black tape around your hockey sticks and but taking the middle wheels out of your rec skates and grinding your first curb. It's all just like I just wonder how if you could culminate everyone's experiences and if they were all filmed and make a documentary, just how identical they all are. It astonishes me. Of course, not all of them, but like I say, it's just interesting for me because where I live is just so. It
Mm.
just feels and felt so out of society. It was just all, but it still somehow reached into the
Yeah.
the narrow-minded, you know,
Well, I always
people that we were.
I always remember my mum saying to me, because I can't exactly, no, I have exactly placed where the idea, like the exponential sort of like potential of skating was nested in my mind. I attribute that to looking at a picture in class in school. Like my friend showed me a photograph in a magazine of Arlo Eisenberg doing a topside acid, and so when and the position, the body position that he was in with this splayed out acid foot on these rails. I've spoken about this actually before, so I'm sort of
I
like
know the picture
almost.
as well. I remember it. Yeah.
And I remember seeing that and thinking it just blew in my mind. It was like, oh my god, like, so he's on that pole and
On that pole.
he's on that pole, skates are carrying the weight, and his body is outstretched almost like a kind of a kick or a sort of a foot sweep, because in Street Fighter days you're doing the foot sweeps with like Ryu and Ken, right? So his
Mm,
leg, so I was thinking in those kinds of terms because I was playing video games at that point in
yeah,
time.
of course.
But then
Again, as was I, and it was Street Fighter, and again, like this
these
synonymous
crossings,
collective like conscience going on. But
my mum saw, I think my mum saw inline on TV and had sort of made a passing comment to me like, that looks cool, or just the dynamism of it just struck her and she made a comment. And she says that that was the thing that turned me, like that sort of turned me. So she
right.
in so talk about that reframing thing. It's quite funny because like my mum in like my latter years almost sort of stakes a little bit of claim over like how I got into skating, which is
Love
most
that.
likely very true because she's a fully fledged adult at that
Yeah,
time
of
with
course.
that
Yeah.
ability to know exactly what's going on. And I'm just
Mhm.
a kid that's just sort of like leaning into things, but not quite sure
Mm.
exactly, whether that's the right thing to do. But there's like that nested idea, it seems like with skating, that just didn't leave. And I
Mm.
think it's that it didn't leave, and that there were these quite intoxicating, powerful feelings associated with the actual equipment and maybe the potential of the movement. But then you were saying that there was this cultural like underpinning of things, of love, of movement, of sounds. And I
Mm.
certainly in my perception, like for instance, if you look at boy and girl groups and stuff like that, with like girl power, for instance, or um there being a slightly more socially aware kind of situation. And I think that explosion of music and like rollerblading and just these
Mm.
activities were kind of a gateway to just some sort of understanding. Who knew, right? Because I discovered a lot of music through skating essentially, and so I went down like the grunge metal paths.
Mm.
So
I
I was
was
like,
there as well. Don't worry.
yeah, this is all 90s shit. So
Mm.
no matter what 90s music was popping, like I was pretty much into it. And I think people now, like, because I work with kids now, right? So it's like kids now know about 90s music, they know about grunge genres, they know about, they're wearing
Mm.
like Nirvana Soundgarden t-shirts or stuff like that. But I don't know, I'm just like, oh, if only you were there. And like, but not in like a kind of you don't know what you're on about kind of way, because they listen to these tones and I'm sure it communicates a resonance that they really find value in.
Mm.
And who knows where that will go for them. But yeah, definitely, like, we were swept up
Yeah.
with the skating. It's how did it reach?
Yeah.
So your brother
My
essentially.
brother. My brother had, I think, affiliations with people in Bristol. Bristol was the closest city. I was born in Bristol, by the way.
Right.
Bristol was the closest city, and I remember him skating the docks. That was the first street spot that I'd ever sort of heard of that had this feeling of, oh, like, is this a safe place to go? It really felt like a big boy sort of territory. And I remember him bringing up the docks a lot, and he used to skate with about 5 other guys, none of which were, I guess, worthy of a mention. They were just kind of his school friends. But I would say that I heard the name Anthony Mackie a few times, I think, who might have been one of the people that he did actually know. But again, I need to speak to Anthony about this because I'm interested to see if he'll remember at all if he ever met someone called Chris Stirling. Probably not, because it probably would have only been a few times. But yeah, it's weird. I need to find out because again, it might have been TV. You know, it might have because X Games was on TV, right?
Eurosport.
Eurosport, that was it. We used to get up and watch Eurosport. So you know, it could have been that, but it's weird because I've got an awful memory, and it was just like this thing. Like he spawned like a Grand Theft Auto character with like massive puberty t-shirt on and just road jeans. Can you remember road jeans? They were like massive wide jeans, and they had like the strip like down the side. They were exactly the same. Yeah, it was road, and because people were wearing those no fear like pajama like jogger things. They were like pajamas, but like real triple X, like thin cotton. So they were all rocking them. But it's interesting, and I really don't know. But again, it was just that thing. Like it probably was. It could have been the case that he did spawn into that character of himself because, again, of that power of marketing, man.
Yeah.
Like it was just so ubiquitous everywhere you looked. Like was just, you know, lots of specifically teen influences. It felt a lot about like, let's push all of culture and music and film towards like teens, it felt like. But again, I was a teen, so it's like, is it just relative to my experience in the moment? But then when I
like
look back,
whole world is about you. As a teen, it's like the whole world about you, and it's just you.
Exactly. It's like, was I so self-absorbed that it just felt like everything was being gifted to me? But it was. But that being said, when you go back to a lot of those 90s films, you know, you got like these big like Clueless and films like that, where it is like they are specifically all based around teen life. There was a definite thing about this emphasis on what it means to be a teenager and rebel a little bit, coming of age kind of thing, which you can hear in the music and you can see in the films. But yeah, no, it's cool. The other thing that I quite enjoy about having like a pretty crappy memory is that, again, it does make it seem a bit more magical to not have like the very beginnings. It just like things just appear in my mind, like those the Bauer FX3s just appeared in my mind. I don't know how we bought them. I don't know where they're from. They're probably from like a sports shop, because they were just selling them in a sports shop. But no, yeah. So I just find it. I find it so fascinating how similar everyone's story is. It really doesn't. It doesn't take away the individual importance either. It almost adds. It adds a level of like connectivity and just this shared experience, which you could argue it's like, well, it was everyone just jumping on this bandwagon thing, but it just, again, it didn't feel like that. It was just like you were just doing it. You were just doing it. You weren't thinking about it, you know?
I think there are a lot of like material, commercial sort of marketed hooks for sure. I mean, I definitely like the idea. I love this idea of the GTA character where you're just like, dung, puberty top, dung, massive like Janko jeans, boom, like,
Yeah, right.
you know,
Yeah.
yellow Katy Fatties or something. I love
Spliffy.
that.
Sorry, I
Spliffy,
just remembered another one. Spliffy.
Spliffy, naff, you know, like these bomber jackets and stuff. And there was like this kind of like subculture like element to it where it was kind of like nefarious kind of taboo kind of images on these especially with Spliffy. It's like basically this kind of, you know, cartoon character smoking what looks like a massive like joint.
Yeah.
And so like that got banned at school and stuff like that. So there were a lot of things either good or bad that was sort of like marketed towards teens, and obviously the teen shows, coming of age shows that we all, you know, could sort of talk about for hours and hours, whether that's Round Twist, Heartbreak High, you know, these sorts of things, of which Heartbreak High, of course, actually, you know, Drazik Bolton, and probably had some other Aussie skaters in it as well. But that was, you know, a pretty formative kind of, I don't know, like permission for skating as well. It's like
that specifically Heartbreak High, like really, for me, the fact that they had the half pipe in the playground, it really like normalized it and really just made me think, wow, this is almost like a physical education type thing. It almost felt like this is just a staple now. It's like football, rugby, biking, rollerblading, it all sort of submerged into it when I saw that. But it still just was, no, but it is clearly very individual. But, you know, but no, that definitely changed my conceptualization of it, seeing it on TV just so normalized like that. And, you know, same with Mighty Ducks and all of those things. But
Mighty Ducks,
sorry, I cut you off.
No, dude. Literally what we're supposed to do, to be honest. Well, give or take. Mighty Ducks was, you know, just cracking my veins kind of thing. Like I did watch Mighty Ducks quite a lot. The idea of gliding, I think there was something about, and I've again, this is something that I've mentioned before as well. I think in that early stages of my teenagehood, I did start to think about wanting to be like impressive. I did start to think about wanting to have some kind of quality or attribute that made me attractive. I didn't know exactly attractive in what way. I mean, I think it would be fair to say that I did start to have like kind of ideas that, you know, oh, I like girls, and, you know, I have like maybe attractions to certain girls that I had been around. But I went to a boys' school, so that was few and far between. Maybe there was like a little bit more of like an overemphasis on being like impressive or having to have some kind of skill or attribute. And I thought that ice skating, for instance, was always one of those things where you were kind of like, you saw people floundering, like Bambi on ice kind of thing. So the idea that you could be adept on like a surface that required just like grace, poise, control, technique. I mean, I didn't think of things in that way probably at that point, but it seemed an impossible feat to be in, so to be controlled in that kind of situation. And going to ice rinks and roller discos again, it's kind of like there'd be a lot of people floundering, and then you had these people flying around, and you looked at them and you're like, oh, I wish I could do that. That just looks so fucking awesome. It's so impressive, and people seem to like gravitate or like people who kind of move in that way. So I think, like, you know, it wasn't just like the grinds or stuff like that. It was that kind of just skating and gliding.
Yeah, right. And I think with the roller disco specifically, is that thing, like what you were saying, like it was a beautiful thing to just listen to the music. And really, I could just talk about, this was really one of the first things that hooked me. It was a basketball court in a gymnasium. So we went to, it was our local leisure center, and me and my brother would go on a Saturday morning, which is funny because it was like a disco, but it was in the morning. In hindsight, it's a bit strange, but they had like all these blackout blinds, and you would have like, you know, some strobes and things. But But it was that thing about, well, firstly, it was the grip of the wheels. I think that was the thing that hooked me the most. So this floor was one of those real extremely laminated maple wood floors. So, you know, like a proper NBA court, you know, like you hear the squeaks on your trainers. Yeah, proper squeaky. And it was that first, when you just push out and the grip of the wheel and you start to move forward.
Oh my God.
Like I really feel like that was the moment. And it was just the moment of moving. It felt like magic because of the physics of it. The physics take over basically. And you're like, I don't need to think about it. Somebody's pushing me. There's a force that's pushing me. It doesn't feel like it's me. And that was that thing where it's like, I am just moving and this feels amazing. So it's not only that, but it was also this circle, this unison, like circle movement of being with other people. And like what you said, clearly being able to delineate the flailing Bambis from the real slick, just sort of guys that were actually, sorry, I've gone off tangent. Because I've just remembered it was always the slick guys were the slightly older guys, but they were the quad guys. It was always the quad guys that were the slickest. And they were the guys that were really just sort of, it was like, it almost felt like they were doing it for a purpose, as for a lot of people were doing it as a leisurely activity. But you get the older guys that would go around and they would sort of, a lot of it was about sound for me as well. When they would do a 180 and they would stop on the front stopper, and the squeak would just, it's literally like the but it was like dun, 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 and that would be so it would be so intimidating for me when I was a kid. And they had the big tongues, the big socks, you know, sort of like a wife beater on, always had the big silver hoops, you know, frosted tips. But yeah, so I think I had a similar thing. I was like, hang on, there's half the people here are sort of flailing and wobbling around. And then the other half, or maybe 3/4 of the people were flailing. And then the last quarter was sort of rolling around in this sort of, with this sort of equanimity. It was like this equanimous, calm, composed, just hovering. That was the other thing. It just felt like hovering. But I had the same sort of thoughts that you did. I was like, straight away, what have I got to do? How can I become the latter? How can I become the slick sort of, you know, equanimous style of just effortlessness kind of thing? And to be honest, there wasn't a lot of chicks at the roller disco, but I still think it was that age where, of course, that was all I was thinking about. Yeah. But it's funny because it's funny because it speaks a lot to like today's sort of skate thing, where it's kind of like the only people watching are blokes, you know. So it's like there's not many there, you know, or not. I don't know. I'm so out of the fucking skate world. I'm so out of touch. But you know, it's that thing where it reminds me of that thing, you know, when you get into fashion and you really are obsessed with these certain brands, but the only people that know if those brands are cool are the people that buy them. Nobody else would appreciate what you're wearing. It's kind of that kind of thing. And so I don't know whether it was purely for chicks or if it was just to maybe, and this is what I was speaking to you about at Dom's wedding, maybe to sort of mimic the older guys, to be able so I could be the one that was maybe slightly intimidating. And I don't know if that was what was going on as well. Like I wanted to be the guy that could just sort of, because it was always you were weaving in and out, and it was about speed, and you would weave in and out of the people that were Bambi-legged. And I was like, maybe I want to be that guy rather than the Bambi thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really really interesting, and so when you were describing the roller disco, and actually when you stopped to say, oh, I've broken tangent, it almost got to quite an apex kind of like visualization of that, because I did also go to roller disco, so it's like how you described that unison, and also the kind of playing with physics idea. I think that was the
Mm.
first playings of physics that I actually had. And, I actually first skated in my kitchen so that the groins and the thighs press outwards and you move forwards. And it was,
Sorry, I've got to interrupt you again. My first time was in the kitchen as well. Just to let you know,
oh, there you go.
kitchen floor. I put the skates on, stand up on the chair, and it was always like the one footer. You have the one trainer on, and you just roll
Yeah,
along with
yeah,
one
yeah.
foot. That was just a thing, right?
I can't remember whether it was 1 foot or two, but I seem to remember just sort of like the legs going apart. And again, that's that legs akimbo, Bambi on ice type situation where it's like, I would never have dominion over this world at all. Like,
Mm.
I'm not going to be able to control this. Like, this is absolutely phenomenal. But it was just so exciting. And then to sort of fast forward some months maybe later at the roller disco, to see people with smiles on their face and genuinely enjoying that, like, that playing with physics, that the
Mm.
mechanics of their body that they've been used to for most of their lives is actually being
An
kind of
illusion.
put to the test here. Yeah, or an illusion, or
Mm.
there's other dimensions of it that you weren't aware of before, and now that you are aware of it, you're really really finding this fun, and you're willing
Mm.
to come to like roller discos or go out
Mm.
with your friends. And I think with the quad skating, they already had an established culture and practice before inline
Mm.
came about. So I think like your account of there being these sort of really adept quad skaters with, their get up and certain
Mm.
attributes that they'll
Well,
be known for.
they look like the spliffy guy. That's what they look like. They were him. It was like this some permy kind of thing. And sorry, yeah, I interrupted you again.
It's just that unison, and just sort of like being in motion with people. How you doing? Yeah, cool. And
Yeah,
then
right.
as
And it's all together. And it is so different to what we all ended up doing. It's the total opposite. When was the last time you went out? No, that's not necessarily true. I've had times in London actually skating where it has reminded me of that. When you're going from spot to spot, it's not in a circle, but it's that when you're all together and there's something about traveling with a group of people at the same time without you're just rolling. There's something about that
we do that
experience
a
that
lot.
is, yeah, and we
We
do
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 that
that
a
a
lot.
lot. You know what I mean? But when you're on your own, it is very individual. But I think that was a huge element of why I loved it as well. Just the fact that you were just amongst people
Mm.
and you were going around. But again, that was probably romanticizing about what's been going on this year.
That's
So
what
I'm
we're
like, oh my
supposed to do.
God. And now it'd
What
just be like, oh, do I want to do that?
was it? You sort of we sort of opened up, or I think a few moments ago was sort of talking about like kind of avoiding articulation, avoiding other modes of like saying who you are or putting yourself out there either socially or expressively or whatever. And skating kind of creates like a path where you don't necessarily have to articulate. So almost like in the roller disco, that kind of weaving in and out, going faster, having a little bit more of a command of the physics, and sort of not sort of like, ha ha, you're floundering, I'm not, but it's
No.
kind of like there is something. There's a benchmark that you're putting out there. There's a statement of intent. Maybe there's a statement of who you are. That's low resolution, I guess, because it's just you zooming around. But actually, for you in that moment, it probably avoids some of the awkwardness and difficulty of like being
Of
like an
course.
articulate person, and you're a kid at
Yeah.
that point, so you're building a language otherwise, I suppose, at that point. Does that make
Yeah, I
sense?
think absolutely. I think that is, I couldn't have put it better myself. And I think hearing you say that, I think that was what was going on. Like again, in hindsight, that is absolutely what was going on. It was real just insecurity of being able being able to be a confident person when when you're 13, for fuck's sake, and it's like you don't know what you're not. It's too early to even be thinking about that. So at least let me pretend physically that I am. That's it. You know what I mean? Like, let's just pretend physically that
Yeah.
and it's funny that that because it can really be it can be, I don't know what the word is. When I say confident, it's like you can really pinpoint certain aspects of your character with certain moves. Like, I do remember actually feeling for the first time in my life, which is, again, this is only in hindsight, it wouldn't have made sense at the time, but I remember distinctly, like, just sort of doing, it might have been my first grind or whatnot, and I did my first 180, but all four wheels landed at the same time. It made a perfect little thud, and I remember feeling charisma for the very first time, and I remember thinking that I had a social experience with a bunch of chicks at a house party, say a few months after. Again, I'm kind of making up the time, but
Cool.
And I remember feeling that sense of charisma, talking to them verbally, and realizing that, oh my God, those two feeling that I feel like that because I can't think how to say it. The feeling that I felt when I suddenly felt this element of confidence speaking to some of the girls at the house party, it was exactly the same feeling in my head than it was landing the 180. And I was like, hang on, so the feeling that I got from the 180 was a sense of charisma, which is the same as the verbal, the physical sense is the same as the verbal one. It all felt the same in my head.
Right.
Like, it was the same thing. And I think that is the beauty, really, of skating. It teaches you how to become competent at something, and it teaches you all the the unfairness of how life can be and how much better people are compared to you. But us being the amazing beings that we are, we have the benefit of hindsight and foresight. So we can, all of those teachings that we learn from skating through just the physicality, there's no talking involved, maybe thinking, we're able to extrapolate those teachings and meanings into other, I would argue, almost every other aspect of our lives outside of skating. And that I sort of realized that from quite early on. Like, that's a good example of that real 180, feeling charisma. That charisma was like, I can aim towards that when I'm talking to someone now. I can aim towards trying to achieve that feeling in my head, to sort of stand up a bit taller and just sort of put my shoulders back and just be a bit, like, raise my voice a bit more, don't sort of hide inside myself. And I was quite privy to that early on. I think it was like the feeling that I could achieve through the moves, I could sort of extrapolate over into, let's call it, Western society.
So no. That is really interesting. So, like, yeah, I follow what you said there, and there was several things that popped up in my head as you were describing that. With a 180 with authority, with good posture that worked as you saw fit, as you needed it to work, with an according sound effect, thud, feeling through your feet. So there are several things that are working well there that you wanted to work well, you wanted to feel with that 180. And we all know what a good 180 feels like. It's just something you can't replace that feeling of good 180, right? But you were sort of saying that because you're able to make things work and implement these ideas in your mind about how you want to be seen, or how you want, like, a skate move to feel, that translated in terms of charisma, personality, confidence. Like maybe there's an emphasis with that 180 that you were searching for, a control, you want to make things work socially. You want
that's it, really. Yeah, because it was always, again, it's just so universally the case when you're a bloody teenager. Of course you're insecure and unsociable. Like, of course everyone is, to a degree. Maybe not recently. I mean, everything seems to be changing, but I think it was so clear to me that I could just hide in the shadows to a degree and learn what it was to be confident sort of on my own through these tricks, in order to, again, extrapolate what those teachings and meanings over into social situations where I could potentially just drop dead from fear of shyness and all of these things. And I felt the more I could sort of learn these sort of tricks, and I guess we're essentially talking about discipline as well. It genuinely helped. I would say that I mean, I was very lucky because of my brother at school, but I wouldn't say I was popular, but I did well, and I do put a lot of that down. I do put a lot of that down to the practice of rollerblading. I really do, like, because I was doing it so often, and I was learning all these things, and a lot of it was sort of overcoming fear as well. And there's nothing more, confidence inducing than overcoming fear. That really is like the warrior mentality. There's no, better thing to do it, to just make you gain more perspective, and I was quite young doing quite a lot of mental shit, and it really helped me socially, man. It really did, because it just sort of, to put it really simplistically, the perspective changed from where you're like, well, I've done something where I could have physically died, and now I'm in this conversation with like two chicks, one of them I really fancy, or whatever it is, and it's not quite as fear inducing as the huge whatever it was that I did at the weekend, jumping off somebody's roof or something. And it did feel that simple to me. It was just that simple to me. I could just sort of extrapolate those teachings and meanings over into my social life. But it wasn't always that linear, of course. I was always awkward and shy and insecure and fearful, as most of us were when we were that age. But I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying. I mean, I fucked myself up real bad when I was younger. I broke my leg really badly, and again, it's just something that I would have mentioned before somewhere. But I hurt myself really badly off of the back of what I perceived to be like a rejection that definitely wasn't a rejection at all. Like it was nothing of the sort. It was just more of a kind of overvalued idea around self-loathing, where I didn't feel that I was socially capable in those particular areas, felt the pressure that I needed to be able to go and engage in courting behavior, right? Didn't really know much about what I would say or what I would do, and therefore from an analogical point of view, that fear or awkwardness that I'd experienced when I was sort of just experimenting in those kinds of areas, trying to be out there in those kinds of areas, what I perceived to have not gone well, I turned into, right, I'm going to basically go and try things that I'm not competent to do. I'm going to try and, complete moves and use the language of tricks that I have no business actually trying at this point of view. So I tried to really expand and aggressively broaden my abilities there, and I got really badly hurt as a result of it. And actually I didn't frame it like that at the time, but when you
it's the same print. I think it's the same principle what you're talking about.
It's kind of like it's kind of like the inversion of what you were talking about. It's like the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I tried to overcompensate I basically tried to overcompensate. I was like, okay, well, if I do an alley topsoil on a down ledge, then I'm definitely gonna like somebody, somebody's definitely gonna like be into that. And it's like, what am I gonna do? Like, go and tell up another potential or the same potential girl who like I worked at Waitrose with that
Yeah.
I've alley topsoil the down ledge. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Like,
it's
oh,
just,
okay, cool.
it's yeah, it definitely
But you're
yeah.
all up here though, man. That's what's going on. You're all up here. And it is funny how linear and obvious it is. It's like it's almost not even metaphorical. It is just like I'm gonna do that so I can do that. And yeah, I really did use it as a tool, I think. And yeah, I had similar things to what you just experienced as well. And it's like when you go back in hindsight, it's like exactly what you said, like what would she have said if you told her that you landed it?
Because there's that
What would have happened? Like nothing.
there's that really jokes meme. I don't know if you've seen it. I mean, if you're not so fingers to the pulse of like the sort of cultural ebb and flow of skating right now, then you may have missed it. But you may have seen this meme otherwise. But it's this like fairly young lad and fairly young girl in a club, what looks like, and then he's just basically shouting in her ear something, and then she just looks disgusted. And then like the meme is basically, yeah, I'm really good at topsoils and that, like it's just, and then she's just like this. But I mean, there's different versions of that meme.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just, and obviously the reason why it's a meme is because it's basically like a composite of something that happens. That's
Yeah,
what
right.
that's something that
Yeah.
happens that blokes by and large, or people by and large, but let's just call it blokes for now, try to go above and beyond to impress or show their competence at certain things, puff their chest out, and try
Yeah.
and gain attention or other things socially.
Attention's a huge one, man. Just because attention seeking, like I was always professional at that when I was a kid, because I guess I've got a bit of like second child syndrome because I had an older brother, so of course I was always sort of seeking it out to a degree. But the thing with like attention is that it's not even sort of it's not even based on gender or anything, or it's not even about chicks or anything. It is just you just want to be seen. And it doesn't matter who it is. And it's even more interesting because sometimes it is yourself. You want to see yourself, really. I do think that is what's going on. You want to be able to see yourself. You're too immature to know that when you're really, I don't know how old we're talking about now, I guess 13 or whatever, but it's, you are trying to find yourself to a degree, but you just need some acceptance and some encouragement from both male or female, any in order to achieve that self-confidence and self-worth, especially yourself. You do need encouragement. And I think it's easy to get lost in sort of, I guess, like the Eastern philosophy aspect of ego and narcissism and things like that. But I do think we do live in, like I mentioned earlier, like Western society. We do need those sort of incentives, and I do think encouragement and having these, like what you were to me, like this real archetypal role model. And I know I'm saying that because maybe we never actually got to know each other, right? So
Yeah,
but but that's how it felt, and that doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter either, I don't think, which is the really fascinating thing. Like, it doesn't matter that, yes, I could meet my idol and you'd end up being a douchebag, and like, it just doesn't matter, because what's done is done. You've already made the impact. You've already made the influence has been ensued. But I've gone off tangent again.
Well, unless you get cancelled for some fucking disgusting crime.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Which could happen. So stay
But
safe out there.
is this period, because you just sort of mentioned it a moment ago, like this sort of, we almost were sort of thinking about the beginnings, the sort of formative years of your childhood and early adolescence, which, you know, and all of the things that we've so far discussed are all sort of emerging and firing off at that point in time. And is this sort of like, so um 13, 14, 15, okay, we're in the late 90s, so um you know, and it is sort of a quite difficult period of time to nail down basically like what happened. um you know,
Mm.
actually, Dan, like I wrote like several like actual questions to ask you, right? And I think actually maybe for the purposes of how much we've covered of this like early period of your life, it just makes me think of maybe just straight up just asking you a couple of things that I'd written
Mm.
down that seem to kind of be relevant to say now.
Yeah,
But
man.
I was, you know, you're an artist. You know, you're a professional artist, and I think, you know, it's not an alien concept being, you know, aggressive inline skater and seeing where that's all gone over the past 25 years, that there's a component to that that you know, could be considered artistic, or comes from that sort of abstract place in the mind that yearns to create abstract meaning through expression, basically. You know, you've been an absolutely you know, elite skater, I would say. You know, and that word would be reserved for a few, because, you know, the feedback that I've heard about yourself, yet alone where I would wander off to watching your incredible but sparse content, I've got to say,
Mm.
you know, the feedback of that has been it's blown people's minds, and it's very, you know, you wouldn't say one thing or the other like that person's got a particularly good trick. It's just this overall like, wow, you know, this is a really like an artistic, interesting guy whose work blows my mind. I only stumbled across your artwork at a later point because of the way that I suppose things have gone. Like we never quite crossed paths maybe as we should have, but that's just
Mm.
the way it is, right? So with that sort of weird kind of preface, I don't know if that even was, I would say, like, was there a moment that you recall defining yourself as an artist? Like, how far back creative self-expression go for you?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I guess the thing is with just the word art is it really does mean anything or everything. It is just so subjective, and I still have days where I wouldn't call myself an artist. You know what I mean? I would call I grew up sort of like in a working class from a working class background, and art to me still today it does feel like a 9 to 5. It really is a um a proper job. I was always told being an artist isn't a proper job. It was always like this pipe dream, but I'm very fortunate to have uh parents that were both artists, and obviously they encouraged me, same with my skating, like just enabled me to become who I have become. Like really, it's down to them, especially my mum. Um, but yeah, it's tricky. There's also an element of like, what gives me the right to call myself an artist? I've always struggled with that, but I would say, obviously, because of my parents, I did start drawing very young. I've been sort of I'm in my mum's house at the moment, where
Right.
my studio is. This is one of my old bedrooms, my old bedroom.
Lucky you,
But
just you need
it,
loads of bedrooms.
yeah, no, that'd be sweet. Yeah, no. So we've been finding drawings like clean that house, and there are some drawings where I've been looking. Me and Mum have been looking at, and there's sort of from the ages of like 3 or 4 or something. I've got one up here, but I can't move because my microphone's here. I've got like these little watercolors, and they are they're very different to my. I've got a little nephew, and it's very, I guess, the classic stickmen, clouds, man, house, mum, dad, son kind of drawings on the fridge kind of stuff. And my drawings were like that, but they were always a little bit more, I guess, not. I'm not comparing myself to anyone, but I'm comparing them to my little nephew, who's very artistic as well. But mine were definitely more abstract, I would say, more abstract, almost sort of, is this kid on the spectrum kind of thing, you know? Like instead of the stick men, it would be a sort of triangle man, you know, or a circle man or a square man, or basic shapes. I think I was always sort of weirdly obsessed with. But yeah, no, it's difficult. I do think I would say the last four, I would say the last 4 or 5 years, I've finally at a place where I can confidently, in a conversation, if someone asks, what do you do? Just straight up, without any sort of doubt, just be like, yeah, I'm an artist. And I've struggled with that for so long, man. Like
I was
in my
going to
life.
ask you, is that something that just saying out aloud, just
Yeah, it's a tough one. Because I grew up in England, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no, if you even a whiff of pretentiousness, like in our whole fucking culture, it's just like, oh, fucking get real, man. It's always been like that, which is why I think it's always felt like a more of a 9 to 5. I feel like I'm definitely more of a what's the word? What fucking hell? What is it? Not a craftsman. I don't know. There's a better word than art, which is it's more about like you're actually doing rather than thinking. I can't remember the word. Sorry, man.
Well, no, it's okay. I mean, you used a word a moment ago that was something that kind of is at the center of a kind of a question that I wanted to ask you, but it kind of quite nicely. And I suppose, well, firstly, I guess my first question would be, do you define yourself as an artist? Which you said now you've got the validation, at least given yourself that validation.
I think so. Yeah, I'm all right with it now. I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. I can say it. And it's only like going back to like our previous stuff. It is just in social situations with when I'm a bit like, it used to freak me out. I'd just be like, not freak me out. I would just be like, it's too broad, man. It's too broad a brush to stroke. It's just like, well, what does that mean? So there was a period where I just said I'm a painter. I remember saying I'm a painter. I said that quite a lot of times. But then obviously people were like, oh, paint and decorator. And I'm like, pretty much. So it is weird. It's hard to explain it, but because I also had like an illustrator period where I would have called myself an illustrator when I was doing lots of commission-based work. But now it's definitely fine art, what I do now. That is the category, fine art. But yeah, it does feel really nice, man, to just be like, yeah, I'm an artist. And I think that is the thing that I always had elements of trepidation about, was that it was too broad. So when I was saying it in those social situations, it's like you just have to go into this big self-absorbed fucking conversation just about trying to explain what you do, and then you have to show them, because you can't explain it verbally. You just have to get your phone out and show them on your fucking Instagram or whatever. And then instantly you're just in this sort of, no matter what situation, you always find yourself in this sort of, I'm just talking about myself, and I've been talking about myself for like 5 minutes, and I just get a little bit uncomfortable in that situation sometimes. Sometimes I love it, of course, but yeah, it was just a bit, I wonder if it was different if I didn't grow up in England. Do you know what I mean? Because we're all, you know, we were very good at poking fun at each other and, you know, taking the piss. And I think that really helped me in my sort of artistic career to really not get lost in the woo woo of it all, I guess is the word.
Yeah, no, that makes, and so you've got these like early pieces of work, as you described, what it seems you were communicating through those early pieces of work weren't exactly down the line figures, like stick men turned into triangle men and square men.
Yeah.
One would say you were just a big fan of the Mr. Men.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that
but
was going on as well, man, for sure.
was like, were you pursuing practice? So actually, just to go back a second, the word you used was practice. Now, practice to me is actually a really, really key word in my life, I would say. Because what the word practice means to me is probably in some relation to some of the things that I've done repetitively, that I've enjoyed, that I've liked, that I've had some sort of psychological, dare I say it, deeper relationship to, right? So the practicing of a sport, or the practicing of then skating, whether I conceptualized it as practicing back then, the reality was that I was doing it so much that it inevitably was practice. But I may not have understood exactly what this idea of practice really means. And I suppose it depends what lens you kind of understand that word through.
Right.
So, I mean, fast forward some years ahead, and things like practice of meditation, for instance, which is something that, I've incorporated into my life. And I suppose, like, the purposes of meditation are various for different people, whatever, if you need to calm down or this, that, and the next. For me, like, a daily practice. And I think the benefits of that are that kind of confrontation with, like, myself and what things really are going on inside of me. And there's a delineation, or in psychological terms, an individuation that's taking place in that practice, because it's not, I'll do it once a month. It's something that I had to work very hard to do, like, on a daily basis, like that 9 to 5, in a sense. It's sort of like being done rigorously, workmanly, like, job like, because it's just the practice. I'm just sitting and breathing, and that's all that I'm doing. But then you realize the kind of the busyness of yourself and what else kind of comes in there. So when you use that word practice, and when I think of Dan Stirling in his studio every day, sort of with this impetus to work on pieces of artwork, and you think about that word practice and what's actually sort of going on for you. And so I hope I'm, like, kind of making sense about why that
Absolutely,
word practice stuck out. And is that sort of like is that the relevant concept? Are you doing art, practicing art, as opposed to sort of, like, either working on commission, so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's really interesting, man. I think it's a much better word than whatever else the other word is. It is, and it's the same thing with skating as well. Like, and I think in the last 4 years, actually just changing the word to practice. And when I think of practice, I actually think of discipline more when you say it. But it makes me think. I think one of the reasons the turning point into the sort of more confident sense of just calling myself an artist was when I started to realize that art itself, every piece and drawing that you're creating, is literally a practice. It rather than this all-encompassing final finished piece, which I am very prone to creating, when I started letting go of that perfectionism, which I still haven't I will never let go of it, but it freed me up, just going, hang on, right, this drawing is just a practice for the next one. And it was the same with skating as well. When I realized that this doesn't have to be the one, this isn't it isn't the definitive one finished final piece. It's just a warm-up. Everything's practice and a warm-up for this. And that was one of the most freeing few years of my life, being able to reconceptualize that from this one piece has to be it, or this one trick has to be it. It's all just, no. It's just you're practicing, like literally practicing for what might be. And that never ends, I think, is what I realized. There never will be the thing that is. It's just always going to be building, practicing for this thing that you need to accept that will never come. And that's what just is the most freeing thing. And I think that's where all of my confidence came in the last 4 or 5 years with art, because it was like, I really could just be like, right, that one's okay. Like my sort of baseline is always, it's the same with skating. I used to go in with this attitude of it needs to be really fucking good because of what I was watching. I would watch you and I was like, I need to be that good. And I didn't get very far with that attitude. I really didn't. I think as soon as I realized it was kind of, everything was a warm up, and to treat every trick like it was a warm up for what might be able to happen. You can still have this idea of the final thing in the back of your head, but that was when I started realizing that everything just freed up and everything actually started coming together. And the irony of it is that those moments where I've truly accepted that it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be the one, have ended up being what I consider the most perfect moments and the most accomplished moments for me. So the proof's in the pudding. I think a good example of that is my one and only fucking section with Dom. Not the street one, but like the park one. It was just really like, this is just a warm up, almost just to show myself and other people like maybe what the potential is, rather than the actual finished product. And that was how I was conceptualizing it. It's like, I don't have to land all of this stuff. It doesn't have to all be perfect. But I am so getting lost because it's such a huge thing for me, this perfectionism thing. It's always been so huge because I've always been so insecure, and I've always found life, not always, more often than not, I found life very challenging. You know, I've suffered with anxiety and depression for as far back as I can remember. And perfection has always felt like I guess like an egoic search that never really got me anywhere. But it's so tricky because without that level of like wanting the perfection and needing it, would I have achieved what I have? And that haunts me sometimes, and I'm constantly going back and forth. But to be honest, like I say, things changed after like all the big family stuff happened for me, which we spoke about briefly, and loads of things just sort of stopped within a few days, actually, of like really trying to, I guess you could say, prove something. But it's not that simple. I'm getting lost. You talk.
No, I think I think there was always the possibility when we're talking about these kinds of themes to kind of wander off, and I think that's actually like the beauty and purpose of having like a conversation at this point of things, because I think despite that we have maybe the ability to sort of like kind of come back in and rein that back in a little bit as well.
Well, what was your original question?
Well, I was asking you essentially whether art for you and your modes of self-expression were actually practices, whether it's this concept of a practice. And you just brought in the idea of you brought in the idea of perfection and how that's how you feel about achieving perfection through yourself in what you're doing, and there being, I suppose, an inadequacy about the idea of perfection that haunts people, that haunts you.
Well, it was always driven by insecurity, and it always has been for me. I can't speak for other people, but it's always come from an unhealthy place. It's always, you know, I used to write about it with some of my old work. Like the more precisely detailed my work is, and skating as well, probably, the more insecure I was feeling on that day. Like really, if I woke up on the wrong side of bed, I'm I'm trying to do is just prove to myself that I am worthy of life. Like it really is that sometimes, because it's so I'm on my own for like 8 hours a day. There's lots of overthinking and things going on, but yeah, it sometimes it is just that. I mean, that is the anxiety for me. Do you know what I mean? It is just like, well, I just need this to that. Sorry, this is what I wanted to say earlier. So it's not I think from early on, my perception of like the perfect actually became, and this is where I think I started becoming a bit more capable in terms of like being confident, actually being better at art and skating, was when I realized my actual perception of perfection is not even good, but just okay. And I think that's why it's deceiving when you say perfection, because really it's like, I am so happy if we're talking in terms of like a collective of people that are judging you for something, if I think I've been in the art world and the sort of performance art world for so long, where it's like, if enough people think it's okay, that you are fucking onto a winner. Do you know what I mean? Good is so far above anything that I can ever imagine becoming. It's like when you watch films, man, there's such a huge gap, isn't there? Like I just think to be okay at something, just to lower your expectations all the way back down, is when all of your confidence just naturally rises back up when you lower your expectations like that. So my level of perfectionism is nothing like what perfection is. It's just okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was just thinking about this idea, like for instance, working on skate parts. Unfortunately, you've seldom worked on, like the kind of, I suppose, well, you've seldom worked on skate parts. Basically, you haven't worked on many, but what you have worked on is, I mean, I'd have to say it's just absolutely outstanding. The level section, the section at the level skate park that Dom filmed, you can quite clearly tell just from your body gestures, just your posture, how you appear, that is almost like you've got a few more gears to go into, and that it's sort of riddled in your body and in your facial expression as well. I mean, even you end that part with this 720 corkscrew on like a skate park that I've got on like splinters like that big up my arse and stuff like that. It's kind of like a sketchy skate park, a kind of skate park that basically don't fall over. Just make sure you stay on your feet. Just make sure you stay on your feet. I mean, I remember going to the level skate park when I was a kid and it being like, Jesus, this place is a little bit intimidating. So I think some of the takeaways from that particular part were that you had like gears to go into, that you were nowhere near the ceiling, and that you were essentially just saying that in your posture, in how you shrugged things off after you finished the particular moves. But then conversely, I would say that is perfection, because it's an honest representation of like a feeling that I think you're feeling, that I'm definitely picking up and making up in my own mind that that's what you're about. And whether that's true or not, I suppose the proof is in the pudding, as you said. And yeah, I mean, you brought up this, brought this sort of making skate parts into it, and somebody's actually chopped that section. I don't know who did that, but with that other section, where it's like street stuff, and then you had like a video that was featured on like this huge social media platform as well. People are awesome as well.
People are awesome. Yeah, I forgot about that.
So
that was very, very interesting. Yeah,
millions and millions of views, and people taking on board, your skate work. And for a chap who sort of wasn't exactly like plowing out just section after section.
No, yeah, it felt a bit like, I think it's so tricky, man, because what we're essentially talking about for me, and I know how, whenever I talk about this stuff, I know that it sounds like, when somebody, I don't want to belittle my skills as a skater. I worked for fucking years, like trying to get good. Do you know what I mean? Like I put in a lot of fucking hours, but I think essentially what we're talking about with those things is Dom. We're talking about Dom. It's so, when he approached me to do the level thing, it's actually amazing. It makes me almost, I well up a bit. Don't know why I'm getting emotional about it. I do. It honestly is like, it just felt like winning the lottery. Like it honestly felt like winning the lottery, knowing, because I had just seen I think Vine Street came out before. It must have done, whatever.
2010?
Something like that. Yeah, I can't remember.
But yeah, it would have been post Vine Street. For sure it would have been post.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just knew that Dom was, I don't know who I'd liken him to. I mean, I'd say like he's the Spielberg, but he's probably more like the Christopher Nolan of fucking, videography. But it was honestly, it was such a, not a turning point in my life, but it was like a real thing about, I just learned so much about myself. I've never felt so scared to perform, like to really, because I went straight to the top without any fucking warm up. And I think that I was so terrified because we had like one day, we filmed everything in one day, I think, which only happened because I skated the level every fucking day for years before that. I knew the part like the back of my hand. And it was really at a point where I was really actually developing just a bit out of my comfort zone anyway. But I remember everything about it. I remember waking up and just being like, oh my God, I'm so scared. I was so nervous. And
then go and shoot with Dom that day.
To go and shoot with Dom, because we woke up really early, because Dom being Dom, he was like, let's get the light. He's not, do you know what I mean? He's National Geographic. He's not just your mate filming. He's like, let's catch the sunrise. Yeah. And it was a bit like that. And I was like, God, I've never even skated this early. And, just being a lazy bum. And we just sort of got there and the park was empty. And it was just, he made me feel so comfortable just as a filmer, which was really how the whole day went so smoothly. I think he just was brilliant at just calming me down. Not that he knew that I was playing it very cool, but it really just, I just think that's the thing. I think when I started to film like the first 3 tricks, I was like, something natural, and that's what makes me emotional.
Cool. It is, man.
It's like something took over, I think. That. But sorry.
You don't have to apologize.
I'm not crying because of this. I'm crying because I've fucking been in lockdown for like a year.
I feel you.
No, something just took over, and that is just one of the things that we can't even speak about. It just really was this thing where something completely happened, and I don't know what to say about it. It just was like everything felt just good, comfortable.
It's a fucking outstanding video. It's dope, meaning that it's like a head nod, kind of like you're just there, like, oh my God, like this is just build. This is building.
And it's like a park edit as well, but
it's a park edit.
But yeah, it's strange, but basically it was just, it felt like winning the lottery, because it's like, God, I had no warm up, and it all happened. And it was, overnight it was on like 20,000 views or something, which at the time was a lot. Yeah. And then I think the reason why I get more emotional about it is because of my friendship with Dom. I think that really is what it's about. It honestly is. It's not about that achievement. It is to a degree because it's one of the only things I have done. So it's
Yeah.
beautiful because I've got something to show my kids, and that's always been what it's about for me. Like recording, it's like I've got something to show my family and my kids in later life. That's the sort of basic love that I have for being filmed. It's like, thank God I've got something to show for that huge period of my time, and just to it's just purely like the documentation makes me feel it's just like, thank God. It's not like, oh yes, that's really cool. It's like, thank God, like we captured some of that time of my life. Like it was so big and there was so much going on. But yeah, just my time with Dom at that time, and the amazing thing about filming with him is that all of those tricks, especially the skate section, I would half of them I've never done before. I've never done anything as like proper street skating like that before. It was purely through the pressure of Dom West filming me. I just did these things with no practice. Yes, I could do them on little skate park rails and blah, 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 but I really hadn't had much experience in terms of like proper street skating. And it was just this thing about what is fear. Like it really was, it came to like fruition about like what fear means to me. And all of these tricks were just like, I've never done anything like this before. I mean, this is essentially what street skating is all of the time anyway, because you never know if you're going to land something. But it was just like the fact that Dom's filming, I have to do it. I have no choice. It was really like, I can't waste this guy's time. And it really felt like that. Me being me, I'm overly polite. I'm too nice for my own good. I just didn't want to waste his fucking time. And I was just like, I'm just going to do it. I have to do it. There's no other choice. And I've never experienced that kind of skating. This was nothing to do with the attitude that Dom put forward. Dom was just fucking cool the whole time, man.
Yep.
Like totally cool. And was just like, take time. Just, he would film 100 tries with some tricks and he would just be chilling. He'd put no pressure on me whatsoever. But the pressure I put on myself, because it was him, just made me realize what I am actually capable of when I can just switch from fear mode into, and it's still not healthy, but it was like you switch from fear mode into, I have to do this. I have to, I have no other choice. And you just do it, and you just sort of jump, and then all of your muscle memory sort of takes over, and all of these things happen that you can't talk about because it's just science and physics and
that is really, really interesting. I mean, I understand the emotions attached, man. Like I really do. I understand the gravity.
It's because it's the only thing I've done as well. It's the only thing I filmed apart from all the city stuff, of course, which is even more emotional probably. But
there are several things about that. I mean, I was actually going to sort of almost make the point that given the sort of filming style, music style, editing style, and concepts that maybe Ryan and as a group of friends between yourself, Ryan, Steve, etc., has, like, there's sort of almost like a kind of pressure off kind of situation.
Absolutely, yeah. Filming with Ryan is a whole different ball game to with Dom, and I don't, not in terms of any sort of comparisons. It was just that Ryan really is my best friend, and Dom kind of still was a bit of a stranger, I think, and he was still someone that I had put quite a pedestal. He was up on a pedestal for me, as where Ryan, like, we were really close, so it was way more comfortable for myself. Again, not saying that Dom made it uncomfortable in any way, but...
No, I don't think that is what you're saying. I mean, and actually I have worked on things with Dom, but I never had like his undivided attention, and as you were saying, had that opportunity to kind of pour like everything that I had, my ability to implement like my skills and technique, bearing in mind the fear and danger that I was willing to put myself in to kind of exalt myself, to kind of get to this level that Dom's work seems to encapsulate and demand of me. And I think, you know, I've been in different filming situations where, I mean, in the most recent years, it's more like working with a few different people, but mostly just grateful that anybody would just take my camera with a little bit of guidance on how to operate and just be like, film me, thanks,
Right.
thank you, rather than like a guy who's directorial, maybe a guy that is actually thinking about how this whole thing is going to be pulled together and look like from just every angle kind of thing, or maybe the strength and body of his work up until that point stated to you that you're going to have to sort of come out of whatever shell that
that was it.
building.
And again, that's why it makes me emotional. It was a shell that I just had I was completely forced out of it. And it sounds quite extreme to say that, but it was the lottery comparison was like, at the time, I kind of knew that was going to be it. I kind of knew that would be maybe my one and only proper section. So I was like, let's just try and make this okay. Like, let's just do it okay. Don't make it fucking good or amazing, because you're not going to get anywhere. Let's just try and make it okay, which is why I think it had a good response, because I lowered the expectations. I wasn't fucking around with many technical switch ups or grinds or anything. It was very simple, but just make sure that you have some level of equanimity going on. That's all it ever was. Just stay a little, just don't let the world see how fucking terrified you are that Dom's filming you and this is your one shot. It was like a Pop Idol moment, man. It's like your one shot. And it honestly felt like that to me, because all of my skate career had just been building up to something like that. And it really was like overnight sort of success, which in the rollerblade world is, you know, it is what it is. But and the other thing, like as you were talking then, it made me remember that actually the other part of why it's emotional, because I still think they are what they are. They're not incredible skate sections. They're just nice to watch, and that is what I wanted it to be. They're nice to watch, and we thought a lot about the environments and where the spots were, and you know, it's very autumnal feeling, and we tried to keep that throughout in the skate section, especially with the track and everything, which Steve helped me with, and
trademark rolled up.
Yeah. But no, it's not all of that. It was actually the fact that before we even started filming, it was the fact that Dom had asked me that was the point. That was the point. It wasn't after the section. That was the, what's the word? Not encouragement. That was the like gratification, I guess. The fact that he had asked me, and that was why it was so big, because it was like before we even started filming, it was like he thinks I'm good enough to film. So at that point, that was when for me I was like, oh my god, I've kind of got to where I dreamt of when I was a kid to a degree. I never knew it'd be Dom. I never knew it'd be in Brighton. But to just film a part from like make a part that was like in these skate films I used to watch, like Fast Shoes and the Hoax and things, and
was this you being like
that was kind of like it, man. But
was this sort of like did you ever dream about being a professional, or like did that ever come into your mind, that because you described it as a career and actually it is, and for me I would say the same, but it's sort of weird because I'm actually a professional elsewhere, but sort of a professional here, but sort of not. But anyway,
right.
It's kind of like the pudding bit being like these like elite high level video performance art expressions of skating with like a massive array of skill sets being poured into that to make that something that hits a multitude of people, that has an application to millions through like mainstream social media sites, which would say to me that actually that's the work of a professional, or at least somebody that kind of was going in that direction. Was that always something kind of?
Yeah, I think to be honest, with age that faded. The younger I was, the more I wanted to be a professional, and then the older I got, the less I wanted to become a professional, I think. But I think my experience with razors, because I got sponsored by razors pretty much the year I moved to Brighton, so I was 18, so I was quite young. And again, that was so long ago, and it was so much other stuff. It's not quite as like maybe visceral emotionally for me as like the Dom stuff, which it kind of should be, because getting sponsored by razors when you're 18, the biggest skate brand in the world, should have been the point where I was like, this is the gratification, I've kind of made it. But it didn't feel like that at the time. I remember it felt like it was actually too much pressure. It was really unhealthy for me, I think. You know, I was put in this world with the likes of Quinny, who was supposed to be like on my side, and we would, you know, my first experience of going out shooting with razors was this sort of handrail somewhere. God, I can't remember what it was. One of the best handrails I've actually ever skated. You know, it's just me and Quinny, cameras roll in. Quinny just rocks up and just alley-oop topsoils like a handrail. And I was just like, I can't do that. Like, there's not even a chance. And then second trick, alley-oop fish brain. And it was really this thing of like, I am so not ready for this, man. I was just so not ready. And it's a beautiful thing that they could see the potential, because that is such a huge part of sponsoring a young kid. It's just, you know,
Absolutely.
what, like 60, 70% is the potential. And
absolutely.
And I'll never, I'll always be thankful to the people that helped me out of that, put me into that position. People like a guy called Alan Cole, Stig, who I lived with. He did a documentary with BBC called Hanging with Dre Powell, I think it was called. And Stig was this really outgoing character, proper punk, like authentic punk, like, you know, pink fluoro, mohawk, proper like black leather. He was like in the punk skating era, or still was, I should say. And he was one of the first guys I met in Brighton. We ended up living together. And he was friends with Stu Game, who was at the time, I guess, I don't know what you'd call him, the UK Razors rep or something.
Sure.
And basically, it, you know, it was all down to Stig, really. Like, he was the guy that really just kept trying to push me in front of Stu and sort of trying to he kept on sort of bigging me up, even though I was like, dude, just like, I'm not ready, kind of thing. But I kind of, maybe I was, I don't know. I didn't feel like I was, and then I got sponsored by them. And going back to your question, it really was just a case of, I don't think I could ever be pro. It really was. It really did just, it sunk in. When we went on that tour, we went on that big first tour, which I think was the Kingdom tour, but it was like mixed. Everyone was there. I was in a minivan with Vinnie Minton and Julian Barr, and I was like, this is unbelievable. And, you know, got to skate with Aragon and just all these, it was so unreal. And I was so young, and I was so, again, just in my head and insecure, and I was drinking too much, and I just blew it, man. I proper blew it. Like on tour, you know, like the first day I just fucked my elbow and I just couldn't skate for like 4 days later. And that was like half the tour gone. And it's just, you're rocking up to these spots, and it was just like, dude, like, it's just drop rail after drop rail after kink rail after kink rail. And, you know, and
can we just calm the fuck down, please?
Yes. And I was like, I need to, like, it's that thing. It wasn't practicing. It wasn't warming up. That was the thing. It was just do, execute. That's what it felt like to me. I'm not saying that that's what they were pushing on me, but it was just that, the level of other skaters I was thrown amongst. You know, it was like Dan McLaren like Andy Sperry, all these guys, you know, they were up to like your level at the time. I was just like, dude, absolute beast. I was like, I am just not ready. And
it's quite like a narrow, it's like quite a narrow like bandwidth of like the language of skating, and not that practice idea, more of like a kind of, you know, these sort of statements of intent, these highly expressed kind of statements, you know, on the kind of high value spots like drop rail. So certain spots had high value, probably associated with risk, and the sort of bodily risk at stake there. And like, you know, none of you are going to do this. I'll do this kind of thing. And I think like some of the ways, you know, sort of fast forward again, like to 10, 15 years, and, you know, the kind of skating that I certainly find, I do find drop rails, whatever, drop rails and stuff, cool, good. I'd still do a drop rail probably.
Yeah.
But then there's those sort of types of skating that are more leaning into spontaneity, practice, sort of abstractions based on shapes, based on architecture.
There wasn't much of that going on that tour. There wasn't much of that going on. The other thing is that I have to say it was me getting in my own way. Do you know what I mean? Like, I made it uncomfortable for myself. It really wasn't this like, you're a performing monkey, cameras out, you do it like that. Sometimes it did feel like that a little bit, but it was just me getting in the way of myself. But you know,
you think you blew it?
I don't think I blew it on the tour because I just injured myself on the first day.
Not blew it on tour.
Yeah, I think there was nothing to blow anyway. It was like this, you know, real ominous position of whatever. I think you had a conversation with someone about this. It was like, am I on flow? Is it a boot sponsor? Am I? I don't know what I was. I was just there. But I just think like the most amazing thing about that experience is that is what led to the style of skating that I eventually ended up in, like for like Dom stuff, because I would have never have got anywhere without witnessing at first hand how good these guys are. Like, I just can't even express to see.
You saw Aragon.
Yeah.
Like on tour,
yes. Yeah. And it is really something else when you see it for you know, firsthand. But, you know, it was just amazing. It was just such an amazing experience to just be involved in it. I wish I was more chatty and confident, and I wish I actually spoke to some of these guys like on a level. They were just like mythological fucking creatures to me, man. Like, honestly, I was like, I just don't know what to say. There's nothing I have to say that is of worth to you. And it was amazing. I think the one person I think really helped me on that tour was Chaz. I think Chaz had a massive impact on me. And a lot of the Scots, actually. I'm half Scottish. My name's Stirling. I think some of my ancestors were born in Stirling, actually, I think. But I think we had a bit of it almost felt a bit of like a brotherly tribal thing, maybe just because he could see the ginger hair, he could see the pale skin. He was a bit like...
Yeah, you're giving off Scottish vibes. You're giving off Scotsman vibes.
Yeah, man. And those guys are just honestly the fun. I've never laughed so much like skating with those guys. And Chaz was one of the first people that his skills and ability was completely outweighed by his sort of not taking himself seriously. And to see that he was amazing, because he would often refer to himself in third person. he was like, right, let's just see. He would always be like, let's just see if I can do this. And it would be whatever it would be. An amazing time was at one of the first winter clashes. It was that massive one, I think the one that Bailey won. And we were actually like skating the same thing at one point. And it would always, he would just be like, right, let's just see what happens. I'm going to just try a 540 alley topsoul to Roy
720
out,
out?
540 out. Yeah, 720 out. It might have been that. And the way that he would talk about himself it just reminded me of that sort of dualistic mindfulness. Like, he really understood that it wasn't really that much up to him what his body was going to do. And that was amazing to see that. He wouldn't throw himself. It was all very skillfully done, but he also looked after me a little bit on that tour. He won't remember this, and he probably wasn't even trying to, but I think he knew I was freaking out a little bit and that I might not have been ready. And he kept on joking with me about to really just try not to take it as seriously as it all felt, because it really did feel serious to me. And I really took it really, it was just this big thing. And he was just so cool about it and just trying to he wasn't trying to calm me. He just did.
He recognized, maybe recognized where.
Yeah, I think he could see I was kind of like not involved as much as everyone else. And I was kind of like outside of the circle a little bit, which I absolutely was, because him and Quinny obviously were like tight, and Dan McLaren and Sperry, I think, kind of knew each other maybe, and whoever the big boys or of the Americans, just whatever.
So this is still like Razor's sort of this is like Razor's crew on tour at Winter Clash kind of thing.
Yeah, we went from Scotland all the way down back to Brighton. Literally from north, we went to every single city and did a little demo in a skate park, and then just got street clips all the way through. But again, like, didn't get any because I was just injured the whole time. But no, just to see it and to witness it, there's no better way to grow and to improve your skills than to just watch, to just look and observe. Like, to just observe the mentalities of these guys and see the way that they just did. They didn't think, they just did. Was just honestly so inspiring and such a beautiful time. And I don't regret any of it. The being shy and not talking, I don't regret any of that. It's just, that's how it had to be. I needed to look up to them that much to just continue where I was going. I needed them to stay as these mythological beasts so I could just keep the passion alive. And another thing about Chaz was that he was one of the first guys. He would sort of, I remember we were I can't remember where it was, like a restaurant or something. And he said something like, we were talking about this guy, and he just says something like, all this guy ever talks about is skating. And that, in that moment, because he was saying it, he was poking fun at this guy, whoever it was. He was like, all he ever talks about is skating. And I really took notice of that in that point in my life, because I was like so just obsessed, and all I wanted to talk about skating. And I noticed, as he said it, all I had been talking about was skating. And Chaz was the first one to just be like, right, let's just fucking talk about something else, man. And again, it just lowered this pressure for me a little bit. And it just really helped. And I really appreciate Chaz. Again, he won't know that any of this happened, because I was just like, just to have his support from somebody that I obviously admired so much was just everything. It's everything, man. It's like what I feel with you, like to have those, because it's really about archetypes for me, like these patterns of behavior that you get to witness from a young age and how to deal with things. And it's a weird one, because there's not much talking going on in the skate world. It is all, you're kind of gauging metaphorically from their movements of how to act out in the world and things like that. But he was one of those guys. You're one of those guys. Wicked, just absolutely wicked. I mean, how lucky have I been, man? It's so lucky.
Well, that's a snapshot into your sort of early sort of goings on in the kind of sponsored, recognized sort of part of your career in skating. And it seems as though your recollections of Chaz actually go quite hand in hand with my sort of perception of Chaz as well. Like, Chaz is definitely a pal of mine, and I really, really like him, and I've always really, really liked him.
Yeah.
And I think just from what I know about Chaz, like now, for instance, and just that sense of humor, that kind of you know, not everything just being skating centric, that wasn't something that struck me about Chaz. And obviously seeing how Chaz is sort of living his life at this point in time, or at least over the past few years, going off into these intrepid wanderings into the Scottish Highlands and taking these phenomenal photographs, sometimes
God,
of the
yeah, man.
Aurora Borealis, and all of this kind of stuff.
Killing
and now
it.
he's
Such beautiful work, man.
having a kid now, and I think I saw him at Winter Clash actually just only a few last year, the last super spreader event. And yeah, it was just that kind of Chaz's story, I guess. Like, I don't quite know exactly, I mean, that he would have to talk about that himself, in terms of like how he essentially sort of left skating, basically, be it like a culmination of injuries, or this kind of idea that there is actually more to life than skating. And even for a top pro, which Chaz was, that there wasn't this sort of sustainable structure to kind of keep him about. With that being said, I mean, he literally is in unit 21 skate park, I think, but I don't know exactly the deal is there. As I said, I'm not au fait with exactly what's going on in Chaz's life.
Yeah.
I can, that just how that impression that he's left on you is really, it's quite lovely. And you just used a word actually that I was gonna bring up with you, much like the word practice is the word archetype. And I was wondering if we would be able to just touch on that for a moment. A couple of things related to your artistic vision, some of your artistic concepts, and I'd sort of formulated some questions around that. I don't know anything about art, basically. I know fuck all.
Neither do I. Don't worry,
about man. Art. But you mentioned a couple of words to me that are really interesting words to me, and it sort of has quite a few sort of tangential ideas that stem from that. Bearing in mind you're an artist, I'd imagine that these are concepts that might affect you in some kind of way. And you use the word like archetype. And when I was thinking about you, I did think a lot about the actual quality of your work, and I looked over some of your work and sort of what does that make me think of? What does that make me feel? Where have I seen those images before? And I think the concept of archetype is this sort of like universally understood image. I guess that's one of the.
Yeah, right.
Sure. So, I looked at your work, and these are some of the things that sort of came to mind, like I don't know, ethereal and divine beings occupying the cosmos, falling down to earth, angels, demons, and mythology. And I don't know, in what ways do these images like come to you through your artwork? Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good words. I think I always used to give the same answer back in the day with a lot of my black and white work. The answer was always they just come through dreams, and they really did. Most of my inspiration came from dreams and comes from dreams. I've always had really exceptional, like, strange mixtures of nightmares and dreams. I never know which is which. It's always been like that for me. Sometimes I have horrific nightmares and I can differentiate it, but a lot of my dreams are like, they're not like airy fairy dreams. It's like that whole thing, when people say, oh, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. To feel, to encounter, what the bloody hell's the word? When you are spiritually awakened, I think there's this like meme of like that. It's this like la 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 la, and it's this real chill. Like you see the Zen guy, And actually, no, for me, it was more of like this really intense Christopher Nolan-y strange. It's like too real, and my dreams are a bit like that, like the one I had of you at Dom's wedding, which we could talk about, but we don't need to, because that might not be the listeners might lose interest. It's kind of too easy for me. My dreams are just full of ideas, and I've always. This is funny. This is where I can start to hear myself now. I'm not making sense because I'm not very practiced at spontaneous talking, but I think it's that. So one aspect is the dreams. They just come naturally. Always has done since I was a kid. Always very strange, really hyper surreal. Always. Everything's upside down. Everything's just not real in a sense. It all feels quite itchily. It feels a bit itchy, like it's too scientific. I don't know, it's really weird. It all feels like quantum mechanics and like what's going on under the surface of reality, which it does freak me out. I've always had it. But the other aspect is I have actually found quite a lot of comfort in thinking. So like being an anxious type, obviously it goes either way, you overthink, but I actually find a lot of comfort in creating ideas, and it actually helps with it really helps with my mental health and my sort of depression, if that's what we can call it. It's a real nice way out, and that is why I think I've stuck to art. I think that's like a real baseline of just like, I have a reason to just think of ideas because I actually can conceptualize them, which is a bit of a magical thing. But no, I think I've always been interested in space. My dad was a bit of a sort of half-assed astronomer. When I was a kid, he would put me on his shoulders and he would point to, he was pretty legit. He knew if he didn't just know the Big Dipper or, you know, he knew where certain aspects of certain galaxies were. And who knows if that was true, man? Like, you know, I don't know if it was true. Mum seems to believe that he did actually know what he was talking about. So there was a lot of that. I've always been looking up at the stars ever since I was a kid. I've always, you know, same with the ocean. If I'm at the ocean, I just freeze. I literally freeze. I'm like, I can't not look and just, you know, observe. I've always been extremely observant person. So yeah, and I think in terms of like the mythology and things like that, I've always been drawn to shadow rather than light. Can you hear that chicken in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just shut the window. I'll be 2 seconds.
Dude, yeah.
Actually,
it doesn't.
Is it really loud?
I mean,
no, it is, yeah. There's a cock-a-doodle-doo doing outside. This is living in the sticks, man. That's all right. I have my window open, so it should be pretty quiet now.
I thought it was like a child, like it's like, oh, it's your nephew here, and I was just making up all kinds of circumstances of what the sound was, but it wasn't actually disturbing me at all.
All right, cool. I've just lost the microphone thing.
Probably glitched out with the clip.
You're gonna have to edit all this out. Can you still hear me like that?
Got you, man. Yeah.
Okay. I've lost the thing on it. I don't know where that's gone. It's like a little fluffy bit. Oh, there it is.
Got it?
Sorry, man.
Nah,
yeah,
you're good, man.
So I was saying
shadow world.
Yeah, I've always been drawn to, let's say, the darkness rather than the light for the first quarter of my life. you know, I had a sort of obsession for all things underground, all things rare, all things, I don't know, just not mainstream, all things. I loved black. I always loved black. Black was like a huge thing in my life. Just everything just needed to be black. But then, you know, I have these polar opposites where everything needs to be the opposite, extremely vibrant and bright. And
Floral.
but yeah, it's the same with music and film as well. I'm much more drawn to just the dark elements of life, and yeah, maybe it is just that simple, but
Probably is.
that is what makes me try to create things that aren't that, because it's so much easy for me. It's always been easier to create sort of dark imagery and darker, maybe more negative kind of ideas than it is sort of more light and vibrant. It's too easy for me. So the challenge for me is to try and create something more positive and more contradictory, because they're not mutually exclusive. It's just kind of like, I don't know. I really don't know. You talk.
No, that's it. And I think like I knew that asking these sorts of things, it would take some kind of fumbling around in the kind of subjective.
I love it. It's great because I do think about this stuff all the time, but it's fascinating to see what comes out of my mouth. It's like, it's all up there, but when I'm talking, it's definitely not there.
But I mean, because I thought about, because again, so sort of like looking at your work, some of your artwork, there may be images of dragons. So, you know, I understand to an extent the mythos of the serpent and the dragon in as an image, as an archetype. It's got like this really interesting sort of spiritual and religious connotation to it. And so the sort of ethereal sort of divine beings I interpreted as these sort of ballerinas sort of in full pose, but sort of splayed across like the cosmos, looking as if they're sort of hurtling down. So there's this idea of hurtling. So there's this sort of ethereal space where beings occupy as images, which is something that on a personal level, probably stuff I couldn't quite describe in terms of what we're doing right now, but those are things that have come into my consciousness. Or maybe not, maybe maybe there are things that I've read that pertain to those realms. And when I look at your work, it's like, whoa, this is loaded, you know, like the Haitian, as you know.
Yeah, I love that. Was a great piece. I think yeah, you're right.
Does that make any sense?
It freaks me out sometimes. I remember, wow, talking like in this aspect of sort of like the dark realm, one of the first art books I ever saw, I can't move, it's there, was a H.R. Geiger book, which obviously says a lot. He was one of those guys where if you look at his artwork, there is no origin, there's no source point of his work. When you see, you know, especially just the actual alien design, there's no, all we can do as artists is copy. That's all we can do is copy, put it all together in an original way. But when you look at his stuff, I remember being a kid and just thinking, well, hang on, there's nothing natural from our earth, on our worldly reality, that has been swapped and shifted and changed in this. So where has he got this image of that alien from, if it isn't actually, unless he actually didn't see it? I remember thinking that. It's like, he's actually seen it. And that was astonishing to me, and it still is now when I look at his work. He's one of very few that is able to do that. Francis Bacon's got a bit of that going on, where it's like, where is it coming from? There's no, for me, it's easy. For most artists, it's easy. You just look around you. Nature is always there, and you just mix and match things together, and then it's a brand new thing. But it's always mix and match. It's always from something. You're always mimicking the world of reality and nature. But with his work, Geiger especially, it always felt like, is it Carl Jung that talks about the collectivist ideology? It's like something was in him before it was some religious thing that is just inherent in his neurology that has got nothing to do with him. It's just been there since 001, since the Big Bang or something like that. Like there's just this creature that has evolved somewhere. Maybe it is real, I don't know. That's a bit woo. It's a bit woo-woo.
Not really, actually, not really at all. I think, that thread that you were just
there's no inspiration. Where does it come from? There's no inspiration. It's just like when you look at that alien, there's nothing even human. I mean, there are elements of it, obviously, the fact that it has a mouth and things like that, but just all of the shapes and everything. It's like, it really, I remember thinking he has been abducted. If anyone has been abducted and taken to another world where these things might exist, it's him. And
I mean, it's a diabolical monster that will rip apart the human body and mind. And I think that's the impression that those films left when they dropped. They were so profound in how terrifying they were to people. And I think the images were just so loaded as, in terms of this diabolical monster that would just, annihilate people sort of indiscriminately with no particular agenda. And
but sorry to interrupt, going back to your original point, sci-fi, my dad basically installed a level of a huge love for sci-fi. Sci-fi is everything to me. Blade Runner completely shifted my conception of the world. Just how things in the future aren't shiny, they're not brand new, they're not gleaming, they're more fucked, they're more dirty, they're more covered. Everything's covered in dust, and it's that whole conception. And the soundtrack was one of the most important soundtracks of my life. That Vangelis soundtrack that truly changed the actual tissue in my brain. So sci-fi is huge for me, and Alien was a massive thing for me as well. And I think, of course, in a Darwinian aspect, it stems from a level of escapism. Like I said, I've always struggled with like the reality of life to a degree. Not always. I love reality, but that the etherealness of stars and space and watching things and listening, music is way at the top for everything for me. It always has been. But to hear and to watch those things is the closest thing back in the day to be able to get out of my head, get out of my mind, get out of that claustrophobic sense. It's that thing, before you're told, I think it was Sam Harris that said, you live your life thinking that you are behind your face. Like you as a person, you're behind your face. And watching things like these movies, like actually The Matrix was a huge one. That reminds me of going back to skating, actually, because that was 99, I think. The Matrix delineated beautifully that concept of dualistic mindfulness, that mind-body split. It was so clear. It was you're plugged in, and your body is over here. So I don't have to be in my body when I'm skating. I don't have to live that reality. I can separate the two. And to see that film at that time, again, now, yes, very novelty, and you can point fun at it, but for it to be so clearly conceptualized, that was so huge for me at that time, and that helped my skating so much. That film like really helped my skating. I genuinely believed that I could just leave my thoughts and my fears and my inhibitions elsewhere, whilst my body can just do what it needs to do. And yes, there's elements of actual real muscle memory and things like that going on, which ruins the magic a little bit. But, you know, it's still, it just changed everything. And I always thought that was inherent in me from a very, very young age. I remember I have these two real visceral memories of, which sort of were like the precursor or prerequisite to what would be in like the forefront of my experience in physical activity. So like the first one, and just the way I thought, the first one was the classic sort of, you're holding the glass. I remember I was about 9. It was just before I started skating. You hold the glass of water in your hand. The first thought is, well, the liquid is the same color as the glass, but why is the glass hard and why is the liquid soft and why is the gravity keeping in there? Not only was it all of that unreal epiphany of like the metaphysics of things, but it was also the thing of, hang on, I can let it go. And it's not even an open hand. It's just, if I loosen the grip, even just a fractile, that realization that you are the author of your behavior, and how daunting that felt to me, that this is the metaphor for my life. I'm holding the glass, and it's the order,
kind of like free will idea sort of thing.
Exactly,
like,
yeah. Or I just let go. It is exactly that. And you let go, it's from order into chaos, but it's up to me. But is it up to me? And the second one, which is probably more related.
Oh, you still there, Dan?
Skating. Yeah. See, all good?
No. The internet connection went unstable for a few moments, which is never happened.
Okay.
So that's really annoying.
All right.
It cut off for like 15 seconds, but we were sort of just talking about the free will idea. I mean, you were just right in the throes of that. It was really, really interesting. I'm so bummed that you cut out there, actually.
Oh, well, all right. I'll go back. Well, yeah. So it was the glass one. It was the, you know, that realization that I'm in control. I can just let the glass go. And being 9 years old and sort of, or whatever it was, that was a hugely daunting, but also empowering thing. It always has to be both, because it is. It's like, well, it's up to me. That's a good and an extremely terrifying thing. But the other thing that I told my mum a few days ago, which is what I used to do around the same time, it's just before I got my first pair of skates, actually, was we lived right outside a train station in Kemble. We had this little bridge where the trains would run underneath, and it was about 10 feet away from my back garden. And what I would do, just as a natural, just sort of observant kid, pretty, maybe not that normal, I would stand up on the bridge, on the concrete thing. It's a good like 40-50 foot drop, enough, not high enough to die, but enough to paralyze yourself indefinitely.
Sure.
And I was very young, and I would I'd wiggle my feet over the edge of the concrete, right on the edge. So my weight was on the heels of my shoes. And it was the same principle with the glass, where I would sort of shift my weight forward a little bit, and I would look down at the train tracks. And again, it was that thing about what was that motivated by? Was it some crazy level of like masochism? Or I don't think I wasn't mature enough to know what that meant. It was just genuinely like a playful thing for me. I was totally on my own, but I used to do this a lot. I would stand on the edge and I would look over, and like I say, it was high enough to definitely ruin your life. And I would do it on these sort of warm, sunny evenings. I just remember it as such a vivid memory because that is something that you would remember.
Definitely.
And it was this like real sort of big epiphany of like, again, it's not even that I need to jump. It's just, I just need to, if I just lean even the tiniest bit, everything's sort of over. But that wasn't how I thought about it. But then the interesting thing is I would come off the wall, I come back down in the house, and like, I guess maybe in hindsight, but even at the time, it was this realization of, hang on, but I wasn't afraid when I was up there. I didn't feel any fear of the actual height itself. And I think I've always been good with heights. I love being up high, which is interesting. Like I used to climb these trees in the garden and jump across, and they were like really high trees. I would just jump like a monkey. And yeah, again, it was that dualistic mindfulness, like really understanding it from quite an early age, I think, maybe an abnormally early age, which is maybe why I was a little bit, I don't want to say just naturally gifted. I don't think there is such a thing. Maybe I'm not sure about that yet, but it was the reason why I felt, or why I sort of got good at lots of physical activities. There wasn't that level of fear to a degree, or if there was, I knew that I could separate my body from my thoughts. So my body is up there and I was just looking over, but my thoughts were elsewhere, kind of. But again, it didn't feel like that at the time. But that was an interesting memory that I think speaks a lot to my sort of fearless nature of like going a lot of things I do. Because the thing about skating that probably nobody knows apart from the people that I skated with is that I was a bit of a adrenaline junkie. It was at a point, it was a lot about adrenaline itself, and really like, again, like that masochism sort of, I really found a lot of pleasure in just sort of putting myself in ridiculously dangerous situations. But again, that was, I was an element of culture at that time. That's what a lot of us skaters were doing. But, I was very comfortable on mega ramps, massive mega ramps, very comfortable on
big
high things. And that was actually my forte, man. Big things like going to NAS was actually, like that kind of thing that's actually more me than what most people have seen, I would say, which is funny because none of it's been documented. But no, it's interesting. But that bridge story speaks a lot, I think, about the kind of person, because a lot of people, like I said, my mum, I told her this a few months ago and she was like, you fucking what? Like, seriously.
Because what it sounds like if, say for instance, I hear something like that from a young person who I'm working with, then there are going to be like very like clear clinical like risk factors around that particular behavior, and it wouldn't be fully or at least easily understood what exactly is this process that you're engaged in. Are you actually creating are you developing your sense of self here? Is this what you're doing? Because it's not obvious that that's what you're doing, because the stakes are really quite high in terms of how you're doing that. And I suppose confronting and then there being like this mortal backdrop to things, which that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with fundamentally a mortal backdrop. So if you enter into terrains of sort of playing that, there's this implicit sort of explosion or expression of things in your mind about being in a scenario that is fundamentally dangerous and a threat to your very existence. I think that then brings up the depths, as Jung would say. It kind of, being in a situation where you're trying to develop yourself and having various practices, or dare I say it, rituals or other sorts of things that bring about that sense of who am I, what actually goes on inside of me.
I think really that was probably, it's one of those things at the time, it's not worth thinking about, because it would have been something as mundane as general being a 9-year-old. Like, that is the reality. There was nothing deep and complex going on in my head, but in hindsight, it's fascinating because how far does curiosity go? Can curiosity, like, you know, I don't know. It's just mental.
It kills the cat. I mean,
it kills the cat. Exactly. If I just fucking leant forward, then that was it, and then we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Absolutely.
Which is that's the reality of it, which is what most people would find very uncomfortable and strange about that story. And what are your ulterior motives? And it's like it wasn't. There's nothing masochistic going on. There wasn't anything suicidal going on. It was just I was so playful and curious as a kid, and me being on the bridge was the equivalent probably at that time of, you know, Aladdin on the magic carpet, just at a great height. It was just, I was, you know, just living out my Disney reality at the time because I wasn't in tune with reality. And that is why you get the slap from your mum, because that's the truth. You're not in tune with it's not only that I could have fallen, it's that the wind could have blown me over. That's what I have. Yeah, it's the other external factors, like the wind could have blown me off and things like that, which you do think about. Like, that's why I wouldn't do that anymore, because I am in tune with reality now. I mean, if somebody says, "Oi, Dan," and it makes me jump and I'll fall off the bridge, or, you know, I don't know. You know,
this is different, like grips on reality, whether that's, you know, hyper reality or something being surreal or just being real, or whether you're in your own head, or whether it's
this is
elements that are.
This is it. I think I'm prone to living in the surreal, which is why I'm obviously drawn to sci-fi and music, especially. I listen to, you know, I'm in the fortunate position where I can listen to at least 9 hours of music a day. And when the music turns off, I really can feel myself very viscerally, and I can see the objects, and things can feel very harsh and too real and too realistic sometimes. I do prefer, I think, in my comfort zone, especially when I'm actually sort of in a state of depression, it feels nice and warm and cozy to stay in that surreal world of, like, I'm living in a movie. I'm the character. I'm the protagonist. Is that the right word? Of my own experience, rather than, oh, no, this is actually it. Like, I am living. This is the experience, and I think that's why, the same as you, I'm sure, you know, studying certain aspects of Eastern philosophy. I've done a few Buddhist retreats. I'm quite an avid meditator, I say that. And, you know, learning about mindfulness was the turning point for all of that, because it sort of shifts it from not being so harsh and too realistic into really being able to accept everything as it is, let the thoughts come and go. And that's what's so beautiful about my art practice as well, is that I get to do that for fucking 8 hours a day, because it's just me in isolation, and it's just that over and over again. And that's a beautiful, my favorite thing about the being alone or isolation is that you've really got to, like, differentiate isolation from solitude. There's two very different things. And I've come to learn the significance of the difference.
Well, I saw your emotion come up just a moment ago in terms of isolation in comparison to solitude.
Right.
And the difference between those two things.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Anything can just click me off. But, you know, I have a lot of people saying, God, I can't think of anything worse to just be on your own all day, every day. And I think that's coming from the preconceived notion that they assume that it's isolation, where actually sometimes it is, but it's more so solitude. It really is the difference of like, when I feel isolated, I'm by myself and I feel craving for other people, and more so that sort of FOMO thing, which I haven't had for years, to be honest. I think that just goes with age. Like, FOMO is a huge part of this tangent that we're on. But
what do you mean by that? Sorry.
Fear of missing out. But not even that, just sort of loneliness. Like, like I said, I haven't felt any sort of FOMO for at least like 5 or 6 years, to be honest. I do think it's like an age thing, that thing. But
yeah.
So you have these periods where you're alone. I'm alone for weeks and days. I don't speak to anyone, and it can be, you can end up feeling like you really need people. You need to be around people, because you're uncomfortable in your own thoughts. But then solitude is just the opposite. You learn how to accept, the cold, harsh reality of your own dialogue, your ownness. That's nicely put. Your ownness, and you, through that acceptance, you become there's no sense of emptiness or loneliness. You don't crave these, you don't seek out this, like, I need people, I need to socialize, I need to do this. It all goes away. You're just like, I can be on my own. I can sit with myself, my thoughts. And I feel especially accomplished in this because my go-to thoughts, my default is very negative, and it is very dark, and it is very, I like to catastrophize. I'm very extreme. I'm either completely one way or completely the other way. And I honestly don't know where I would be if I wasn't fortunate enough to be able to do what I do, which won't last forever, I'm sure. Wow. Because I've worked through it, and I honestly feel like I'm at a point, and it's funny because it was only actually about 2 or 3 years ago where I can pinpoint the difference of letting my anxiety and depression actually feel like it's going to kill me. And the difference between, like, I know that can never happen now. I know that I have the resilience and the strength for that not to happen. And a beautiful example of that is that I used to sort of have really bad panic attacks quite a lot. I suffered from severe panic attacks quite often. And that, in those 2 or 3 years ago, which is, again, was a huge part of all the family stuff that happened with dad and mum and my brother and all that stuff, which we can get into. It just was like, there was a part, I never know, it's always touch wood, but I know now that I can never let myself, that I never will get into that situation where I have a panic attack again. And that's a good little example of it, because it's just a symptom.
It's an improvement of how you manage the reality of this array of feelings and emotions and circumstances.
Because I catastrophize, man. Yeah. And just being able to just really, really, really get comfortable in my own head. For this, I'm so lucky, man. I've had years to practice. Not many other people are fortunate enough to have that. Like, that being said, I don't earn a penny, man. Like, that's not true, but I have made a huge sacrifice to put myself in that, and that sacrifice is finance. Like a freelance artist it's a pretty crazy thing that I do. It's very it can be very unsustainable, and all of those things, but it's just the epiphanies that you have, it's just constant. It's just every day. And I think that's why I've always felt a connection with you, even though we've never like properly had a good chin wag, because I just feel like you are obviously someone that is very in tune with all of this shit that we're talking about, because of what you do, especially, like, it's your actual sort of main day-to-day role. But you've always given off this thing that you've got this ironic sense of humor about you. Like even your handle on Instagram, like that's a good example, is just like, I've always sensed that you know what's going on under the surface of things. It's always about what's going on under the surface, which is why I've always been drawn to you and intimidated by you as well. But yeah, no,
grappling.
sorry.
Oh no, grappling is the operative word, and I think we go through life grappling with what's going on inside of our heads and what we must do about that out in the world, and I think like yeah, I mean, again, I sort of described at the beginning of this conversation some of those elements that helped me get to like synthesize some of those views or some of those feelings, or understand what some of those feelings and views and thoughts, what's implicit, what's can I control, what seems to be out of my control. I mean, you just described so wonderfully what goes on in your head, and how the practice of your artwork, come what may, not being a financially necessarily.
Yeah, that's a sacrifice I've made. I think. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
You're good. You're good.
I think my final point on that would be is just like the thing that I've learned. If I was to give, I've got a true like sort of phobia almost of like giving advice. But like one thing that I would say is that if when you get to the point where I feel that I'm at, again, it's always touch wood, and it's just a general sense of like, okay, I know I'm a bit more resilient now. That is all that I'm talking about. It just, you realize that God, the way that society works and that it's set up is that is so not on the top list of priorities anymore, and that it should be the absolute baseline, fundamental element to your experience. If you can't sit alone in a room on your own and deal with your own thoughts, there's something that's not right. And it is astonishing to me how common that is. But again, I'm an anomaly because I get fucking 10 hours a day, and I know how biased I am, but I see it just absolutely flooded everywhere.
Yeah, and you don't want to say
nobody seems to be able to. I mean, I guess I'm essentially talking about technology,
sure.
And it's just like nobody can put anything down. Nobody can just be quiet. And I'm not saying nobody. It sounds, I'm just.
Yeah, it's a broad sweeping brush,
and
it's a broad sweeping brush, and you wouldn't want to come across from like this haughty, like pompous place of like, there are all of these folk down there that just can't do this thing that I've been able to like kind of manifest given my own practices and how my life's gone.
I think it'll take my whole life to even reach it still. But yeah, of course it's not coming from that level of, judgment. It just upsets me. I think that's what it is. It truly deeply upsets me.
Well, I think when you see it, like when you see, for instance, like relationships go really wrong, with that being one of the components to why a relationship goes wrong, and what comes out of relationships going wrong is just like, kind of ill will sometimes,
example,
betrayal, like these quite like kind of biblical, deep sorts of terms that are quite profound elements of like what we do to each other from like a spiritual and physical kind of sense. Those are the things that are acted out as a result of that lack of emotional or spiritual work or emotional intelligence, and Lord knows, everybody has like this quite unique and different route to sort of delving through, or maybe clearing a path through the noise of mind and of experience and of reality, to that place where it's almost like the most simple thing on earth that we're talking about, but then it's also the most complex thing on earth, hence the myriad of religions and spirituality and religiosity. So it's kind of like, how do you get there, right? And so that's that comment around, well, it's nice to arrive, on a personal level at a place where you do feel comfortable in your own skin. And I'm really glad that that's where you've got to. And if anybody articulates that kind of realization, I think it's just an important thing to say out aloud, either to your family, close ones, or people, you know, that you're sort of trust, or just to yourself, you know, that and it's okay, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
At all. And it seems to me that you know, these practices, these things that we've been talking about are sort of, you know, are really, really important in getting to or arriving to that destination of feeling comfortable in your own skin, come what may. And again, look, you and I are going to be, you know, give or take a few life circumstances, pretty fucking blessed. We've been given like a fertile like underpinning to get this position, both socio-economically, both through affection and love by and large, and being provided for in all of those areas. And then I think when you wander off into the more actually, when you were speaking just a moment ago, I mean, Jesus, I just thought of so many things, but I thought of like your sort of you're leaning into sort of the aspect of surreal, how surreal images or practicing a surreal practice of art comes to you. And then I also thought about your use of geometry, and you know, my understanding of geometry is very limited from a mathematical point of view. I was really shit at maths at school, so this kind of objective numerical mathematical conceptualization was really tricky for me. But then throughout my life, this idea of geometry, of like natural form, of sacred geometry, of these recurring images in reality that then have been processed in me in different ways too. So that really struck me as something as well, because I know that you've used sort of geometry as an expression or part of artwork, and also symmetry as well, because when I look at some of your pieces, there is a symmetry that is going on there. Absolutely. And I suppose the other thing that made me think of, and I guess this might be a bit left field, I don't know if this is relevant to you at all, but are you familiar with like the work of William Blake?
Yes, I've got a big book downstairs in my living room. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of he actually has there's real William Blake stained glass windows just down the road here.
Wow.
That I can't remember if it's just his design or that he actually made. But yeah, it's where my brother actually got married. And yeah, it's this really famous place. People come from all over the world to come from all over the world to look at these sort of William Blake stained glass windows. Yeah, it's a big book, but I'm not hugely up to date with him. But yeah, he around these parts, he's proper. There's all sorts of connotations especially in sort of like religious buildings and things going on.
Yeah, like,
and I hear his name a lot. I've heard his name a lot through my childhood as well.
I went to an exhibition of William Blake, of his work a couple of years ago. And my partner is very, very knowledgeable of William Blake, of poetry in general, and she's just generally a complete G. But we went to this exhibition, saw like his actual plates, like the actual like pieces of artwork, and then the actual writings of William Blake. And again, I'm not like an expert by any means, quite the contrary in terms of my knowledge, but I've got this book, The Marriage Between Heaven and Hell, which is just a selection of poems and these images. And also the thing that I took away from this exhibition, I don't like his sort of the mythos of Urizen, right? I don't know if you know what that is. No. Do you know what that is at all? It's basically this kind of, I'm going to butcher this horrifically, so I'll just keep it as really like zoomed out as possible. But it's one of his, I suppose, like mythos protagonists, I suppose. Right. So I guess like how one would constitute, an image that pulls together the changing of culture or the changing of spiritual interpretation or the industrial revolution in contrast to more rudimentary ways of understanding reality. He created this image of this chap who basically looked like he was in the clouds, sort of reaching down to the ground with like a protractor, right? And then there's
Oh,
like these
I know the
sun.
image. I
You
know,
would
yeah,
know
I
the
know.
image.
I
You
know
would
the
know the
image.
image. So
Yeah, it's a
again,
classic Google image art. Type in art in Google and that'll come up kind of image. Yeah.
it's just like, it's so like loaded with imagery that you don't know, and
Right.
again, so when I look at your pieces of work, this is like melding that's going on when I do that, like, because I could really kind of, and the thing is that, zooming in on Instagram's just shit, and then I
Right.
actually started feeling like, why the fuck haven't I like bought a piece of Dan's work? Like, do I like art now? I mean, I've always, it's not I don't like art. It's just that it has to say
Mhm.
something to me. It has to
Right.
correlate inside on those
Mhm.
terms. And I found that your work did that. So, I mean, that's kind of just
Well, thanks.
a thought to you that's the depth to which I would correspond with your work,
Well,
I think.
that's amazing. That's so nice to hear, man. I think it's that weird thing about being an artist is like, is it you or are you a vessel to carry a message which, like you say, is just coming from who the fuck knows where from? And I do feel like that sometimes, and especially with that old black and white work. And yeah, I was just remembering that the drawing in for the Haitian mag, there was that shape at the top, and I remember getting deep into whatever that shape was called. It had connotations of a pentagram,
Mm-hmm.
but it was this geometric shape that's at the top. Oh no, is it in the middle of the drawing? I can't remember now. It was just a hexagon with an octagon with a.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just reading about this shape and its religious connotations. I was like, this is unbelievably deep. Like I've never read so much depth, and I just got down this rabbit hole of like what pentagons mean and hexagons and things like this, and how just a better I don't know what the word is, just how ancient
Mm-hmm.
shapes and meaning goes. And again, going back to Jung, it's like how much of that is already in our psyche. It freaks me out, and that's what I love about it. It really does freak me out when I look at like the drawing that I did for Marika. I did an album cover for Marika Hackman,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the one that you alluded to earlier of the woman in space.
Dropping the
Like,
crown, dropping the crown. Not
no,
not that one.
not that one. No, that's
I love
Steve
that too.
actually. Yeah, that's just up here. I wish I could show you, but no, it's the one of all of the women and the ballerinas sort of floating through space.
Yes,
But
yes.
when I think of that, I just think I actually don't. I honestly don't know whether I could have. Well, again, it's all relative, but could I have thought of that in a conscious state? It came
Mm,
to me in a dream, like most of those did.
wow.
They all came within about 1 year. All of those drawings in happened in like a year,
Wow.
all just in a dream, one by one by one. And I'm just like, I do wonder if it's a stupid question because I wouldn't be trying to think of that imagery in the first place. But I do wonder, like, wow, I guess how in I don't know. We're talking about dreams now, essentially. Like where
That's
where
incredible that you have straight up derived ideas in clarity from dream states. There are certain reasons why I can't necessarily pull through my dream states and incorporate them as vividly as I would like to.
mm,
But I have had profound dreams, some of which are ancient dreams at this point in my life, some of which are 30 years old, that have stayed
mm,
with me and have almost like formed part of my own like personal mythos. And I suppose that's kind of what I was getting at when I was mentioning William Blake and his sort of a character of Horizon, like, is there a Dan Sterling mythos? And actually, when you talk about pulling through the content of your dream states, which
yeah,
you
yeah, because where I get lost in the whole thing, like what you just said there about, like, if something's reoccurring, it has to mean something. It just has to. Those dreams of those black and white drawings, I never have had any dreams since anything like them. But the dreams that I've had since have been way more weird and crazier. But the other thing where I get lost is how, and again, it's relative to my experience, is imagination, and how powerful your imagination is and where that comes from. And realistically, is it genetic? And we're talking about your parents, really, I think, in terms of your imagination. But the imagination is the same thing as what I was talking about earlier. Your imagination is, the way I perceive it, is you only can take already existing things and melt them in a big, huge melting pot in a very surreal, obscure way. Or you sometimes have these imaginations where it can feel like they're not of this world, which it rarely doesn't anyway. To the non-observant, the average Joe would always think of their imagination as weird, as where for me, I'm like, oh no, if I can see Leon as a centaur roller skating through Lego in an upside down spiral through a pentagram,
I can't believe you just said Lego. I've got to pause you there. I'll have to make this point. Just a second ago, I just mentioned to you, this is fucking crazy, actually. Just a second ago, I mentioned to you that I've had ancient dreams in my life that are 30 plus years old, that have stuck with me throughout my lifetime, that have changed in the sort of how it transpires in my head when I think of it, and is reframed year upon year as I get older and older. But the general meaning, I've been able to just sort of settle down with, right? And this dream that I is when I was a child. I moved to Trinidad and Tobago when I was 4 years old. That's where
cool.
And I lived there for 2 years. And I had a dream when I was in Trinidad. I can't quite remember exactly how old I was. I must have been maybe 5 or something like that. So young, fucking young. And this dream was that we were in essentially a version of the house that we were currently like living in Trinidad. So it's a very rudimentary house, like almost like mud walls, basically, something like that. And so at that time, in the dream, I was digging anywhere. So if I dug into the floor, which would have been maybe wooden floorboards, it acted as if it was soil. And then what I would find when I dug were Lego, right? And then when I dug into the walls, there would be more Lego pieces. And this dream was basically pulled together by this idea that I would find Lego pieces no matter where I dug in this, like, maybe the first dream or one of the first dreams that I ever really had, that I just couldn't ever shake, about digging, finding Lego pieces. And whether Lego was this kind of high value toy that was seldom, you could say what you want about what that actually means. Now, that you've just brought up, that is I don't think that is nothing.
This is actually the dream that I had about you. You've probably forgot because we were maybe highly very drunk when we last spoke. But that dream that I had about you at Dom's wedding, which again is the one time I've had that dream, was you skating through Lego. Can't you remember? This is what we actually spoke about.
We have done.
So we've already had this conversation.
Jesus.
But dude, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and we were both so drunk, like really drunk at that point. So it doesn't surprise me if you forgot. It was the night before I had a dream about you skating through Lego. It was extremely Christopher Nolan Inception style, the way that it worked, but you were skating through the circular bits on Lego, like you were skating through, when you skate through a blind man at the traffic lights.
Yeah.
So you were rolling through there, but it was this beautiful thing where the Lego blocks were like that, and as your back wheel were touching, the blocks were, say that was the block you were there, it was like pinging up, like that. So you were rolling very smoothly, but the Lego was like pinging after you. But because you were on the flat bit of the Lego, it's pinging after you. And basically, what was happening, this bit you'll probably remember, is that the Lego was waving you up like this, and you were flying in the air, and you were doing, and I remember specifically, you were doing the 720 method tweak that Fraser Watson did at that NAS that one year.
Wow.
And I remember it was exactly the same thing, because that was one of the most incredible tricks I've ever seen in my life, even though he's never seen it. Mm-hmm. The way that he looked like some sort of bullrog rolling around, and he tweaked. And it was that thing, you know, when you dream and you do a tweak and you're constantly tweaking it forever and you never land.
Yep.
It was that. You're never landing. And the Lego was pushing you up like that, and you were just spinning and not really landing.
Oh my God.
But the interesting thing about it was that I was chasing you in the dream. So I was really I was behind you the whole time. And my basic idea was that I was trying to catch up to your level of skating or whatever it was. I was always one step behind. But the Lego for me is just about, it was always just the real basic, like, Lego are the building blocks of life.
Building blocks is exactly what
it's
take
just
away,
so obvious. Yeah, because you're actually building, you're doing it when you're a kid. It's the ultimate metaphor, like a block of Lego, man.
Did it twig at four? Look, yeah, forgive me, because I guess, you know, the whole wedding experience, being an usher, being away, you know, just that whole experience was pretty spectacular and overwhelming, and just you know, unbelievable, really.
Amazing.
So I can't exactly remember whether in that moment I would have twigged and recalled this dream that I'd had about Lego and, like, my house in Trinidad, which is one of the sort of forming moments of, like, my, like, again, it's one of the forming things of how I do things. It's like, I value dreams highly from that point onwards. I knew there was something else going on. I knew that there was the potential for something else going on. And as you say, it's that young idea of, like, archetypes and what information is loaded within those experiences. Building like your house, like, is your house, like, stable and sturdy, or is it malleable and can it be destructed? Is it, you know, is shit a game, or is it actually more, you know, a need to build these, like, sturdy building blocks? I mean, this is not what I was thinking or feeling at the time, but how can this be brought forward 30 years later and be reframed as something significant, or not, but in psychologically, or, you know, from a psychic point of view, you could say there's a heavy loaded significance in that. And would I have tweaked at that point? I mean, I can't remember.
You did. Basically, I think the thing was that I was really trying to make an effort with you. So I was really I was talking like there's no tomorrow, because I was really nervous. It was the first proper time we spoke for longer than 10 minutes. I was just so drunk that I was like, now's the time, because I'm wasted. I feel great. And I started talking about it because it was genuinely, I woke up, it was that morning, and I know that my dreams are weirder when I'm hot as well. Like, and it was in fucking wherever we were, it's boiling hot. I didn't really sleep. And I was like, the hotter it is, the weirder my dreams are, you know, when you're trying to take your clothes off and you're like, cold sweats, then that's the real Christopher Nolan dream within a dream type shit. And I just was like, I need to tell you about that. And as soon as I mentioned the word Lego, I just had your 100% attention. You were literally like, what the fuck did you just say?
Right. Okay. So,
and I was like, what do you mean? And then we were just like, there were people around us just like trying to distract us, and we were like, no, everyone go away quick.
I remember the intensity and, like, wonder of that particular conversation, because then I went away and spoke with Joe, like, my partner, and just said, like, I just basically had, like, maybe the first, like, real conversation I would have had with Dan, even though I felt like that either should have happened by this point just through osmosis and just our, like, collective like friend group, hence we're at a wedding together. It's like, how could we of like, and then you know, sort of said, you know, but I don't deal well with alcohol. Like
Yeah, me neither.
it's difficult for me to like bring things home when it's essentially an alcohol fueled sort of situation, which is so rare for me. And I guess that's what stood out, which is that I got into this really like intense, like meaningful and actually interesting conversation with Dan. But then it made me think about like the time before that we'd been in close quarters, which was also, I think this was me and Ben, my housemate, at yours in Brighton, you and Ryan, and then like me and Ben. Do you remember that? And like you guys were just like playing this like just like wild like contemporary kind of auto tune like kind of like hip hop rap music. Basically, like I was just like basically spinning out on your sofa. And again, there's not too many takeaways from.
I do remember. Yes. Yeah.
And then like that was my the
Like
sort of other opposite experience of like being in close quarters with you, but again it wasn't sufficient.
Obviously. Wasted, man. Yeah. Yeah. That's so hilarious.
It makes me think about you know, you as part of Escape Crew, as part of like city life. When I think of city life, I definitely look up to all of that work, that fun, vibrant, not taking things too seriously kind of work, where you feel like all of the guys have got like a level or two to move into, that it's not that it's full expression, like it's full aggression, like it's full anything. And I think a lot of people became quite endeared with that vibe, for no use of a better word. Could you when did city life actually start? Were you part of the beginning of city life?
I would say so. I met Ryan around 2009, I think. And we instantly hit it off. It was with Ryan and I, it was really a case of just having so many things in common. It was just too easy. It was almost too easy to be friends. We just had everything in common. But it feels like most importantly, it was like our age. It was just like we just sort of found each other. It really felt like finally, like there's just someone exactly the same age as me. I think he is like half a year younger.
It was his birthday, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Happy
it was.
Birthday, Ryan.
Happy birthday, Ryan. It was just so. It was love at first sight. It was just so natural and so easy. And the thing with Rye was that, and this will always be the case, he's the total opposite of me in terms of his sort of, I have a very heavy outlook on life, and he's got a very light outlook on life. He's very, I don't throw this word around like so effortlessly, but I would say he is actually quite a happy person.
Yeah, I'd go along with that.
Like he's
I'd definitely go along with that.
Yeah, he's a happy person, and I haven't been a happy person. I'm too happy and I'm too sad. There's not until the last 5-6 years, it's all balanced out nicely, and that was a perfect recipe for me. Like I really got, and still do and always will, get a lot of sort of just relief just being around him. Like it's really like the opposite of myself. It's really nice to
foil.
Yeah, it just lightens me up, and it's really nice. Also incredibly frustrating, obviously, at times, as it always is when you spend too long with somebody and you live together, and
sure,
all of the realities of that, and
sure,
but so yeah, met him in 2009, and then this is where my memory goes so blurry, because dude, I was just drinking so much around like the inception of City and things like that.
Kind of a done thing, I suppose, at that point.
Yeah, it was
Brighton
really
as well, isn't it?
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was just party after party
Booze
after
town.
party, Booze town, and everyone's constantly coming in from London, and the skate scene was massive in Brighton because of makes me think of Joe Coyne. Joe Coyne sort of seemed to be the catalyst, is that the word, for just this huge scene, and he was always
Palmyra Square.
Palmyra Square, yeah, and Jake and all of those boys just seemed to be constantly having these wicked social events. Constantly, they always were just so. For me, just on a personal note, before I met Ryan, all of those guys, it was just so generous, so welcoming. Just from the second I met all of them, it was just like open arms,
good Pete,
just so respectful, so nice. And to this day, just have so much respect for all those guys. Jake Ely, especially, he's always been so supportive. Joe, you know, I'm trying to think of more people. You know, just all that crew. It's like a whole crew of them, isn't it? Like, I thought of Ed Inglis as well, and Stig, and the other Stig.
You mentioned Stig earlier on. I was like, who the fuck are you talking about? There's only one Stig.
Yeah, right, yeah. I think we used to joke about that, or they used to joke about it. So that was all beautiful. But yeah, back to City, I guess. Met Ryan 2009, and then it honestly is just a blur. Like, you need to get one of the other guys on, just because my time, like with you with maths, my maths and time is just all over the place. But it just felt like 2009, 10. I do remember 2012. I remember lots of Mayan calendar shit going on. And I think I remember meeting Steve. I really remember that day. Meeting him was like a big moment in my life. Another like love at first sight kind of thing.
Sure.
And then
easily
Steve,
done.
Yeah. And yeah, I could talk about just them and meeting them, but it's difficult when there's my first memory of when we thought of the name and how shit the name is and how terrible it is, and that's the point, is when we were in Sam Tufnell's house. And I would love to talk about Sam Tufnell as well. Shout out Tufts, because he is someone that was hugely played a role in my developmental skate world. Like he's one of those mythological creatures. He's up there with you and Chaz and all that lot.
He is for me.
Something. It's just archetypal guy. Anyway, so we were just in the living room, like all just drunk. And I think I'm going to butcher this story, man. Basically, there was a clip of the Briley brothers. It was either Adam or Keith. They're doing, it might have, you know how jokes those guys are. We loved the Strange guys because they did that drunk. Was it drunk?
Drunk skating, drunk blading. Yeah.
And we were always chatting back and forth with them because it was funny because they sort of understood the sarcasm of the
big
British
connectivity.
humor. Yeah, it was a big thing. Like, we were both very all about mocking and like just mocking the seriousness of it all, and that was what it was all about at the time, for us at least. Anyway, there was just a clip, I think maybe of Adam, where he just said something and then said "City Life," and then all of us at the same time were like, "Oh my god, this is it! Let's create some sort of skate crew and just call it City Life," because all that we were doing at that time was literally just cruising around the city, and it was just all about City Life. We were just constantly out on the streets everywhere, going, you know, here and there, and
socializing, skating, filming, parties, little bit boozy, developing oneself, trying to figure out what you know. This is like I'm sure everybody had their own lives that they needed to actually go to school, go to uni, try and get a job, and all of that kind of stuff. But you're all in that like sort of figuring yourselves out, but you've actually got the ability to try and figure yourselves out at that point in time. But it's like that's a lot of responsibility. So it's kind of like, let's just have a lot of fun together. You guys are cool, we're cool. Like, let's just
exactly. And it was how it always goes. It was all completely natural. Nothing was contrived. It all just ended up happening. I started skating with Ryan. We started skating with Steve, then Tufnell. And then I want to say Simon moved later, but I don't know. Maybe Simon was there before. But Simon, just from the get-go, again, he's someone that makes me a bit emotional again. Sorry.
I have had the pleasure of like spending some time with Simon recently, like literally the other day. And I will be. So
yeah, amazing. Well, yeah, send my love. We met him. That was just, again, I remember just the day meeting him more than everything else. It's like I met him at the level and I remember everything about him, and it was just such a beautiful meeting, and it was just that natural, just like everything in common, and we just were laughing, and it was just beautiful. And he is someone that I have grown. I'm gonna try really hard not to cry again. Like, just really close to now, like in my life now, which is why I'm getting emotional about it.
Of course.
Because we've got this just wildly deep connection that, again, it's like it's one of those things, like I don't know where it came from. It's really bizarre. It just feels so natural. And so he is someone I truly, truly, have a lot of fucking love and respect for. Anyway, just the thing
you can see him in all of the early edits. You can see Simon.
Yeah, I think he was probably one of the first ones I met. I don't know. This is what I mean. I butcher the time frame.
He was very good at the level. I mean, he skated the level amazingly, even those clips like 10 years ago. I'm just so impressed and blown away by Simon. Actually, I've got a real penchant to like just kind of like, I need to just sort of be around you, and like if you're wanting to skate, but then put the skating aside, just kind of just being around you is kind of like, I like that. Yeah. That's good.
It's just amazing to see him. It sounds patronizing because he's not that younger than me, but to see him grow in the last few years and to speak to him, watching him grow from what I can see so much of myself in. And it's just so amazing to see him find it all for himself. It's never a case of me. It's emotional for me with him because I sometimes feel like I just want to push. I felt the need to push him in the right direction every now and again, but I've always restrained, and I always will, because it's not my place. And just to watch him learn for himself, and it's just been such an amazing thing, because we had this conversation the other day just about relationships and love and things, and he's had all these huge epiphanies that I remember having, like at exactly his age. It was weird how similar it is, and we were just like, I was just saying these things, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's exactly it," and blah blah blah. And it's emotional because I see so much of myself in him, even though again he's so fucking different. But
you probably not seen him in a while either.
Pardon?
You've probably not seen him in a while either.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And we've been keeping in contact, which is really nice. But the one thing I would say about City that is really the thing that felt and feels really special about it is that if you take everyone, well, firstly, I should say that City Life isn't specifically a crew or a gang. It really is anyone that we've ever hung out with. That's the way I sort of saw it. You are definitely part of City Life. It was always just like I
never made it on the t-shirt.
Oh yeah, shit, there's a t-shirt. Yeah.
I'm joking. I've actually got it. I wear that.
Oh really? Is it the one with like everyone on his fish?
All the faces on the back. It's a wicked t-shirt. I wear it around the house.
Amazing.
Like, look, I've got my friends on a t-shirt.
Yeah. No, it was never like, oh, we have like these core there is definitely core members. The core members would, I should say, be me, Sam Tufnell, Steve Collis, Ryan Gillett, Simon Isles, Hob Adams, Stu Day, massive part. Mike Wellen, definitely.
Cogs
You
and
know,
Dolls.
Sperry. This is what I mean. It's like Sperry, Elliot
Dom.
Stevens,
And it's, yeah.
just Dom. It just goes on forever, and it's like it's just a fucking name
Is it
that
like
is
peeps that are
just
just kind of cool with each other?
basically just
Peeps are,
everyone
so
that
there's
has
like
just
a
hung
kind of a,
out a few times.
but yeah, but Peeps was cool. Like it wasn't like a crew like you're in no matter what you're like. It's kind of like everybody was cool with each other, essentially,
Yeah,
right? Like,
basically,
and
yeah,
there was a symbiosis with that was going on there in terms of personality,
yeah,
maybe.
and yeah, absolutely. And even with the edits, like from the get go, it was always like, right, who can we just bring in? Like it was never like let's just do us five or six, because I guess it was different. My conceptualization of the core members was just like me, Ryan, Steve, and Simon at some points because we just lived together and it was just our house.
You
But
were doing city
again,
life quite a lot.
that's not what it was. It was just everyone and everything. And, you know, all of that being said, at the heart and the founder and the enabler or whatever you want to call him is Ryan. It is all Ryan. He's the guy that just manifested everything visually and in terms of style and in terms of music and everything. He kept a consistency which did start to make it feel a bit like a brand,
Yeah,
which was
definitely.
hilarious to us. And it did all start to feel a bit like, oh, maybe it is a company or a something started happening. We started doing these collaborations and it did start to move into these cool little pockets of like,
Yeah,
God, I never thought I'd be talking to him or I never
yeah.
thought I'd be doing that. But no, I think the most important thing for me that I love to romanticize about is that when you actually get us all like in a room, it's just unbelievable how unique each of us are as individuals.
Mhm.
Like it really is. It does feel like, I hate to say it, something brought us all together. It does feel like something happened. There was a puppet master somewhere that brought us all together because we're all so different. You wouldn't believe how different we all are. But it was just this thing. And I don't think it was skating necessarily. I do think it was a level of, I don't know what you'd call it. It was just like a direction. We all agreed on a certain direction of
Yeah.
trying not to take it too seriously. I do think that was at
That's
the heart of it.
that prevails. That idea
Yeah.
prevails definitely.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely.
Which, and I should say something about that. Sorry to cut you off.
No, no.
I should say something about that. For me, I actually I felt like the odd one out sometimes, a lot with those guys. You know, I always hear this thing, you know, you hear lots of podcasts and they're always, people like to end their podcast by saying, just have fun. Just make sure you just have fun. And that never really resonated with me. I don't think having fun and taking skating seriously, they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
If anything, I would base most of the times where I've had the most fun have been because I have taken it quite seriously and I've treated it respectfully, and it's been really fucking unfun because it's a discipline and I've been trying to become competent at something, and that is not fun.
Not
It's
that fun.
difficult. It's really difficult to get good at something. It's so difficult. And you know, I know that's not what people mean when they say just have fun.
Mm. Well, it's to
You
be
know,
it's to be kind of it's to be kind of rifled through. Sorry, it's to be kind of rifled through to understand what that actually like pertains to,
exactly,
right?
yeah. Because
If
I'm
you
probably
watch
going
it,
to end this podcast saying just have fun. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I think the important thing with that is for kids or anyone younger, don't feel afraid to take it seriously.
100%.
do not feel afraid. If people think that it's
100%.
not cool, that you're taking it seriously, and it's all about, you know, being cool or whatnot, if somebody says that, just ignore them, because you can't have fun without, you can't have the bad, you can't have the good without the bad. It just doesn't work like that. I mean, it does to a degree, of course, but the only times where I've had fun skating is when I've been skating around and I've gone, oh my God, I've just done the thing that I imagined I was going to do. I feel like Alex Roscoe, like I feel like a computer game. That's for me when it's like, it's so fun because I can do the things that I'm imagining. The only reason I did that is because I spent every single day on my own on a grind box somewhere, just with my headphones in, just going, I'm so fucking shit at this. I can't do it. I'm not naturally gifted. There's no such thing as natural talent. It took me years and years and years to learn a switch topsoil, you know, like all of this stuff. And it was just like irritable, aggressive, just not fun. But that's it. That is okay. That's the big, amazing thing about it. Just allow yourself to do all of that shit. It's not just fun. Do you know what I mean?
Dan, I know exactly what you mean, and I think that's a really, really important point. I think that you know, you'd have to apply yourself to get to a level of competence to use the free will to not exert yourself at the maximum level to show control within this discipline, because you've actually demonstrated discipline to get, and that sort of pulls together what we've been talking about in a way.
I don't know how do you speak? The way you speak is just unbelievable, man.
Well, no, it's the way.
That was it. That's perfectly it. Yeah.
And again,
in a nutshell. But I think it isn't. I think the reason why it's so important is because I remember that happening a lot when I was a kid. If I didn't have this big smile and I wasn't, you know, I fell over and it's all funny. It was like, you're taking this too seriously. This isn't cool. You're not cool. Yeah. It's like because if you take it too seriously, you're taking yourself too seriously. And that's where it all gets blurry and you're like, oh, I can see why that would be a thing, but just don't, it is cool to take it seriously. That would be my message for kids. Like, it is cool, especially something like skating, because it is so, doing something like skating, it doesn't matter what it is. Everyone know it, not everyone, but it really doesn't matter what it is. Anything physical, to learn how to become competent at something and extrapolate those physical teachings and learnings over into your capitalistic world and over into your work life and into your relationships is, I don't know where I'd be without it. I honestly don't know where I'd be without it. And it's one of the healthiest, most incredible things that you could do, because not only is it an individual sport and you sort of get there ahead. Yes, there are elements of working with a team, of course, especially things like city life, and yeah, you get to interact, but not only that, it just, you can take your time with it, with the individuality of it. Unlike, I guess, a team sport, of course you can some degree, but it's really up to you at what pace you go. And that is kind of what I mean by taking it seriously. Like, it's not taking it seriously. You've got to be the best. You lower your expectations down to zero almost, which is what I love about what I'm seeing at the moment. Not saying that it's good or bad, there's no such thing, but it's just, I love that there's a certain expectation that's been lowered. It is so much more, you know, endearing for people from the outside to come in, like, it seems. But again, I'm well out of touch.
Dude, I think that's an awesome point to actually end this conversation on.
Yeah, man.
It's an awesome point. You've given me food for thought, actually, to just kind of go away and just like kind of just mull over that idea. I really like it, and I think that's an excellent place to stop. And
Absolutely, man.
I'll just thank you for your time and your ideas and how your mind works and your honesty. And it's been just really, I don't know. I'm kind of out of words to describe actually getting to grips with you in these ways. So I thank you for
Yeah,
your
man.
time, man.
Well, we should just do another one.
I'm down.
Or not.
There's just lots. Yeah, there's lots that we
No,
would.
dude, you know what we should do? Go skating together at some point.
Yeah. Well, look, that's the other thing that I was going to say.